and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another pair of rounds in the 2023 Skip Barber Challenge Trophy, as brought to you by Gone Skipping Racing and hosted on the premier sim racing platform available only on PC, known as iRacing. Of course, this series is sponsored by Musical Money, the quick, easy and simple way to sell your musical instruments online, and what better way to charge into the second half of the season for rounds 13 and 14 out of 24 with a visit to Japan. But whereas you could argue we should be visiting perhaps some of the more internationally known circuits of Japan, such as Suzuka or Fuji International Speedway, instead we've made our way all the way to the remote region near the town of Mimasaka for the Okayama International Circuit. Previously known as the TI circuit in reference to the corporation that owned the circuit on its inception, this circuit has changed hands over its limited history, but one thing that hasn't changed is its nature to develop absolutely brilliant technical racing, given the fact that it's filled with twists and turns, it is tight and technical, and that does mean that for our drivers it's all going to be about being smart on the brakes and carrying the speed from corner to corner, and overtaking will be possible, but it will require drivers to be absolutely on the ball, and mistakes will be highly punishable. But as we get ready to go racing tonight, let's take you through your schedule. Times in British Summertime, that's BST, or Universal Coordinated Time +1, UTC +1, and as we can see, in just under 19 minutes time, we'll be heading into our qualifying session for this evening, 15 minutes in duration at 8:30, and we'll get to see who's going to qualify on pole for the first of our two races. Of course, then we'll transition over to the round 13 sprint, and that'll be at 8:45 this in for 20 minutes of racing action, after which we'll take a brief breather before returning at approximately what will be at 9:10 for the build up to the feature race. And well, when the grid gets set there for the 40-minute feature, sparks will fly in a mandatory pit stop as well. Could be the difference between being on at the top step come the very end and being outside the podium places. And of course, you're tuning live via the official YouTube broadcast, and that's being brought to you via YouTube on TX141TX. Alternatively, the channel also dubbed under the name of Paul Walsh. But who is TX141TX, or who is Paul Walsh? Well, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Paul Walsh, also known as TX141 or Britain the Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And I'll be bringing you all your racing action tonight, and indeed for the entirety of the series. And well, what a series it has been so far, and we've still got plenty of the journey to go in what is a relatively cool circuit today. Because as we look to our calendar and retrack our steps, we can see that we started off all the way back on the 17th of March, and we kicked off in the US of A with the Charlotte Roval circuit in rounds 1 and 2. There in the state of North Carolina, it was battles of plenty and slipstreams galore as our drivers made the way around the infamous circuit. But indeed, after that, we thought the dust would settle, but it went the complete opposite way, because then Sebring followed in the state of Florida in the US of A for rounds 3 and 4 on the 24th of March, and there it was battles all the way on the straight and also into the corners. We saw many a driver come across going wide, alternatively being bounced around too aggressively on the changing road surface. We then made our way away from the US of A for the first time of the season, down under to Australia, our first of two visits to Australia, with the Mount Panorama or Bathurst circuit in rounds 5 and 6, and there the change of conquering the mountain that definitely proved troublesome for some on the 31st of March, before we made our way back to the United States of America for rounds 7 and 8 in a double header. We're at Road Atlanta in the state of Georgia, with the Bradston Sound circuit, of course, proving to be a roller coaster ride for a road race on the 7th of April, and then a week later on the 14th of April, we made our way to Summit Point Raceway in rounds 9 and 10, and there we saw brilliant freeway battling all the way round the course, particularly into turn 1 on the infamous long start finish straight. Then, last time out, we made our way back to Australia for the second and final time this season, and we headed to the Phillip Island Grand Prix circuit in the state of Victoria, and for rounds 11 and 12, well, goodness me, it was fast and furious at Phillip Island, with the majority of the lap being flat out for our drivers with a couple of limited braking or lift and coast zones. But on the 21st of April, we definitely got to see drivers charge on a round, but the key fundamental of it all has been over the first 12 rounds, as you'll get to see in the championship standings shortly, that Nathan Wade has been indomitable so far, and whilst he didn't pick up a win in either race last time out, he picked up double podium once again and saw his championship advantage extend. And of course today, it is the 28th of April, another Friday passes, and with it we now visit Japan to kick off the second half of the season, with rounds 13 and 14 at the Okayama International Circuit, and then next week we'll be making our way all the way across the North American continent for the Canadian circuit of Circuit Charles Villeneuve, also known as Montreal, and rounds 15 and 16 will see us take to what is technically an unofficial street circuit, and well, you'll see a bit more about that next week, but just imagine a park that is also likened to a street circuit, and well, that perhaps doesn't give you the most ideal picture, but it may keep you guessing already. After Canada, we're making our way to Germany for our one and only visit to the European continent, and that'll be on the 12th of May for the Nürburgring Combined, or what's also known for as the Nürburgring Gesamtstrecke in rounds 17 and 18, and that's going to be a very different tone around, with the extended lap there in excess of what will be 9 minutes, definitely looking to thwart our drivers, and it's all going to be about keeping your cool over the entirety of the lap and having a good memory in your pocket. And then rounds 19 and 20, we make our way back to the United States of America for a triple header to wrap up the season in terms of venues on the 19th of May, of course, it will be the state of Michigan for the Detroit City Circuit of Belle Isle. And then rounds 21 and 22, we make our way to the state of New York for Watkins Glen International. And there it's going to be Skip Barber meet what's effectively NASCAR in the series, with Watkins Glen having perhaps one of the highest, if not the highest, average lap speed out of all our venues this season. And we'll bring it all to a close at Virginia International Raceway in the appropriately named state of Virginia, in rounds 23 and 24 on the 2nd of June, and what are heading to bring the curtain down on the series. With rounds of plenty to go and plenty of variety in our circuits, we could not be treated to a more splendid calendar for this season. And as we look to our championship standings, well, let's give you a recap of the story thus far. Inside the top 10, at the very top, it's Nathan Wade who leads on 405 points versus Steffen Herrmann's 237. The gap has now extended to 168 points to Wade, and the fundamental has been he's always looked to be on the podium. With only one win to his name, and well, right now you'd think that's perhaps an error, but it's the truth. With one win and 10 podiums and one pole position, Wade has proven to be Mr. Consistent and the driver with the ultimate pace from race to race, albeit I think he feels as though he's deserved another win at least so far, but still he'll be looking to go for a win tonight. Meanwhile, in the battle for P2, Steffen Herrmann right now looking for the right to be the major contender to Wade, but with that gap he's going to be focusing a bit more on the fact that he's starting to grow, which is a 46-point advantage over the hunt for P3 as led by Rasmus Vuori, and therefore for Herrmann, it's about getting another solid pair of results on the board and making sure he does not get reeled back in. But meanwhile, with P3 through to P6 separated by only 5 points, and we do have the 4 drivers of Vuori, Geoff Randall, Adam Miles and Cristian Pérez in that mix. All 4 of them will be looking to make sure that Herrmann is brought back into the mix and also trying to get the upper hand on one another, with all of them having great results and at the same time some of them having struggles which have confounded them in terms of their championship gains. But keep your eyes on P5 driver Adam Miles with 2 wins to his name now, albeit joined the series late but picking up a win last time out of Phillip Island. You can imagine that he'll be trying to get a little bit closer to the top 3 and indeed trying to make his campaign to finish P2 come the end of the season, as per his post-round interview last week. Cristian Pérez in P6 holds an advantage of what is 18 points over Daniel Tufts, with Tufts falling outside the top 6 but still continuing his charge, no question about that with regards to the performance we've seen from him. And it's Ryan Jackson, Gordon van den Bergen and Neil Garner completing the top 10, and Neil Garner picking up an absolute plethora of points last time out to see him jump up 8 places and for the first time this season into the top 10. Best of the rest behind the 141-point driver, another 20 points off, is Jack Atkinson, with Atkinson not expected to attend today, but he'll be back for Montreal next week, and therefore this presents an opportunity to Paul Smithhurst, who's equal on points, but behind based on result count back in P12, and it's Mark Beckhouse and one Zia Rodriguez, who can complete the run to P14, with Rinkel Plycer only a further point behind in P15. Nick Vaughan Roberts on 101 points, he holds an advantage now 9 points over David J. Burns in the hunt for 16th, with Enzo Cantor, AJ Campbell and Roddy van der Meiden completing the top 20, and AJ Campbell picking up 19 points to movement inside the top 20 for the first time this season as of last round. And as we look to outside the top 20 and in the run to P30, Stefan Krumholz there holding on to P21, moving up there on 68 points and now ahead of Terry McGrath based on result countback. And between the pair, there's no points, but there is a gap of what is 12 points to Titus de Jong, with Kevin Budgen and Pala Anziosa completing the run to P25. And it's Chris Wayne, JT Kopinen, Clark Williams, Ludwig Sauer and Sebastian Holmichael running to P30. Outside the top 30, not to be forgotten about, Nigel Easy in P31 ahead of Peter van der Noord, with Benjamin Harris and Ryan Walker both on 14 points. They're behind Peter van der Noord, but it's result countback that separates the trio. And Mark Rayner in P35 looking to stay clear of Tim Bertie, with Dave Devine, Arnold Chabonet, Dario Frattini and Marcel Brunschweiler completing the run to 40th. And in our last 2 drivers in our 42-car championship thus far, Wojciech Potacek and Ollie Pimley with 0 points complete your standings. But as we come from the standings then to our circuit for today, well, of course, we introduced it earlier, but now let's give it a more formal introduction. The Okayama International Circuit's full course will play host to our drives today, and located in the Okayama Prefecture near the town of Mimasaka in Japan. This circuit is in a remote region and previously was host to Formula 1. However, due to its remote nature, it did mean that multiple international series very quickly decided to change their minds and go for the more generally accessible for spectators, mechanics and teams, which is Suzuka, of course, or Fuji as an alternative. But whilst the international scene may have left the circuit behind, this circuit has not lost its domestic scene. Being a regular host of series such as Super GT, TCR Japan, amongst others, it is much loved for its fact it's a highly technical circuit, as you can see from the circuit map provided us by iRacing.com. Of course, thank you to them for their wonderful circuit maps and their brilliant simulator. As our drivers make the way across the start-finish line and down towards turn number 1, they'll break the way into the opening corner and charge through the right-hander, looking to carry all the speed into Williams' corner at turn number 2, and flying through the left-hand and in towards the Moss S chicane, which turns 3 all the way out towards 4 outward curve. They'll make the way in into the rise, into the uphill apex, and power out and onto the back straight. We could see some major overtaking opportunities be presented in the run down towards the turn 5 hairpin, but coming out of there, the circuit tightens up and the average lap speed plummets significantly as they then come through Revolver at turn 6 and into Piper at 7. The double left complex then followed up by Redman hairpin at turn number 8, and it's a switchback pair of hairpins at turns 8 and 9. Redman into Hobbs before coming through Might Knight corner at turn number 10, and it's the downhill run into the last corner of 11, aptly named, and then onto the start finish straight to do it all over again. But as we get ready to go racing, let's give you a reminder of the rules. And of course, in terms of car setup, this is an open setup series where drivers are permitted to bring setups of their desire to the racing. The only restriction on the car is the car fuel loads have been restricted to 60% for all race day sessions, and you'll see what that does to the racing very shortly. Qualifying wise, an open qualifying format shall be used, so in the 15 minutes we'll see all our drivers out on the circuit vying for space to put in their lap times, and then come on to the rules of the races. In general, firstly, the races shall commence via a standing start. This is the tradition of the Skip Barber Challenge Trophy. One fast repair is available. Should our drivers need it in a given race, a driver shall receive a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 17 or more instant points, and if that goes up to 25, they'll be disqualified from the given round. Now in the sprint race, there are no mandatory pit stops, so if we see drivers come into the pits, it's for a drive-through penalty or due to damage needing to be repaired. And in the feature race, the grid shall be set based on the results of the sprint race, with the top 10 finishing positions being inverted, so that means in layman's terms, the winner of the sprint race will start P10 on the grid for the feature, and we work our way downwards from the first place finisher to the 10th place finisher in the sprint, and the 10th place finisher starts on pole for the feature, and then everybody else who finished on the grid from P11 downwards, well, that's exactly where they'll be starting on the grid for the purposes of the feature race. And in terms of there being one mandatory pit stop, well, that brings us full circle to that 60% fuel restriction, which mandates the pit stop, and drivers must take on fuel, but they do have the option of whether they want to change tyres. But as we've seen all season, there's no need to change tyres because the tyres on the Skip Barber machines are absolutely durable. But going from our rules and regulations to the racing, which are all here for, of course, we head back to our live pictures at circuit side, and as we do see Adam Miles here making his way on around. Of course, for Miles, it's all about trying to add another win to the scope of his championship campaign thus far. The number 85 driver really shines everyone just how fast he is over the last couple of rounds, and well, could this be momentum that's continued to build up to a crescendo, or will he be reeled in to a degree? Meanwhile, behind him there, you can see championship leader Nathan Wade in the 24, and well, his target today will be to get a win, because of course, we've seen that as a regular. He's essentially established a foothold and a home on the podium, but he's never been on that top steps in the early stages where he picked up one win, but he's looking for another win as a minimum here today, and well, can he finally find it for what is the fourth time of asking? That will be the challenge he's confronted with. But of course, they make their way down towards turn number 1. We say hello to a good number of you in the YouTube chat, including Beatrice Bruno Enk, who says Skippy a time there and lets us know that they're doing fine, and saying news and orthopedics are less bad than expected, which is great, and it's great to see you tuning in, and also by the sounds of things in good or upwards health. And well, get yourself set. Indeed, if anybody out there is tuning in right now and you haven't said hello in the chat, feel free to say hi, don't be shy. But at the same time, we definitely recommend, whilst you do have approximately 7.5 minutes before we go into qualifying, get yourself a nice beverage, whether it's a cool one, perhaps also a cup of tea if you prefer a warm beverage, or as it is a Friday, perhaps treat yourself to a tipple, given the fact the weekend is almost upon us. And if you're in the UK, of course, it's a bank holiday weekend coming up, because once we go into qualifying, the pace is not going to drop, it's only going to tighten, and then we're definitely going to see the intensity score through the roof in terms of what we can expect to see here at Okayama. But as we do see it, Ryan Jackson making his way on down towards the turn 5 hairpin here, a little bit of a distant camera shot, but it gives you an appreciation of how long the straight is relative to the pace of these Skip Barber performance, or the Skippy as it's most affectionately known as. While Jackson makes his way on through turns 6 and 7, coming on down here and getting himself set. Now we do have one newcomer on the grid today, and that is this man in the number 16, and it's Anders Nielsen from Denmark. And as he makes his way on through what is the turn 5 hairpin and into turn number 6, the privateer getting himself set. It's been some time since we saw him in the pre-season practice, but he's finally with us now. And when I had the opportunity to speak to him in the pre-season, he was saying to me in terms of his expectations for the season, well, the key thing is he loves racing with the big names in the championship, albeit he most often finishes in the heavy end of the field in terms of fishing a bit further back, but he's looking forward to mixing it up. And could Nielsen be one of those drivers who really does take the fight and potentially throws a bit of spanner in the works of many a driver, because you can see that he's currently in at P16, and we are still loading a little bit of driver data in the background at the moment, so you may see a couple of names refresh, or at least the overlay suddenly disappear and reappear on your screen. Don't worry, you're not having difficulties with your broadcast. Indeed, that's on our side with regards to the fact that we are having our driver data continue to be loaded, and in particular I do believe it is for Nielsen, as we do see his data being updated there. And well, in fact now we are all set to go, and we didn't have the refresh of the overlay there, thankfully, but as we see, in fact it does refresh there, it decides to play with us, but Nielsen's all set, and indeed we look forward to seeing how he gets on. And of course many a driver will know him from the official iRacing Skip Barber Formula Series, but as he takes to this field today, of course in a private championship, it does throw a little bit of a mystery behind it, or a bit of a conundrum, in the fact that now you're racing outside of officials, and therefore you're racing in a closed group where everyone seems to have a bit of an established pace or form against one another, and then you're right in the thick of it and looking to establish yourself. But as we do see Paul Smithhurst making his way up towards the last two corners, we're coming on down through the double right-hander. Hopefully we'll very shortly be getting a patch through to one or two of our drivers who are getting themselves set to go racing very shortly. And in fact I think we may be able to hear from what is, I do believe, Geoff Randall before he goes into qualify, as he makes his way on down the back straight. Well, we might have an opportunity to catch him here. In fact, we'll give him an opportunity to take a little bit of breathing room as he heads on down, and we also may be able to get patched through with Nathan Wade at some point as he's making his way down the start-finish straight. I think we'll try and get Randall as he heads on to aforementioned straight, and therefore we get to hear his thoughts as he gets ready to go racing. But of course, one of the main belligerents in the battle for P3 in the championship, and the 107 driver, of course, his door number or his car number, representative or his maximum or his highest break in snooker. A little bit trivia for you there if you didn't know that, for the Briton. And as he gets set to go, of course results have not always gone his way. He's had some difficulties in the last couple of rounds. He's also had some major triumphs as well. It's been an eclectic mix, and will he be able to potentially put them to a more positive note and just find more triumphs here, because he is itching, expecting a big result. And well, as that momentum continues to sway for him, he'll want it to teeter in the right direction as he gets the second half of the season well and truly underway. But as he comes through the final corner, we'll hopefully be able to get some perspective from him now, as we do get a patch through to Geoff from the car. Geoff, can you hear us? I'm not sure if we can quite hear you, Geoff.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yep, you're coming through, Geoff. You're looking very fast out there at the moment, albeit currently P9 in this practice session. How are you feeling for tonight?
I'm thinking that I'm going to be fiddling around somewhere in the middle tonight. Don't know my way around here that well, but yeah, I still feel like I've got a lot to learn.
It's going to be a bit of a learning experience. Will you be trying to utilise qualifying for that, in terms of perhaps not qualifying high up the grid, but find the pace and going into that first race, perhaps move your way up the order?
Yeah, I'll give it my best. I mean, I think I'll just sort of I haven't really got a plan for tonight, actually. I'm just going to go for it and see what happens.
Well, sometimes it's best not to go with a plan and go with how it goes, and we look forward to seeing what happens for yourself. And just a quick thought on the Okayama circuit. Of course, it's not really an international circuit. It's beyond its heyday now, more of a domestic circuit. But we're here for this season. What do you think of Okayama?
Yeah, I love it, actually. It's a really good combo for the Skippy. Nice, tight, twisty, nice twisty sort of hairpins, and a few little sweepers. Yeah, it's a fun little circuit.
Well, it sounds like you're enjoying it out there, and indeed would agree with you on that opinion of it being a fun circuit. Well, with that, Geoff, we'll leave you to it, and we wish you all the best luck in tonight's racing.
Thanks, Paul.
So here and there from Geoff Randall from Gone Skipping Racing, one of the series organisers, the 107 driver. And it's always good to get his thoughts going into each and every round with 2 minutes left as he makes his way into the pit lane. But interesting thoughts there. Expecting himself to be in the mid-pack rather than up towards the front, where we've normally seen him contest the front 2 rows of the grid. And, well, perhaps not exactly belittling himself, but just showing signs there where he's not quite perhaps on the pace, given the fact he's not as well rehearsed with the circuit compared to others. But again, as he mentioned, not really going into tonight's races with a plan other than to enjoy it, go for it out there. And well, could we see the pace gradually evolve for Randall, indeed for a couple of other drivers who may not be as familiar with the circuit as qualifying goes on. Of course, they do have 15 minutes, and with the lap time around here being just over what is 1 2/3 of a minute, it will give them approximately what will be about 6 to 7 laps And a couple of outlaps thrown into the mix there definitely could see our drivers spring themselves up through the order, but of course that will be the challenge. But as we do say hello there to Racer77, I do believe that's Paul Smithers who's saying hello from the pit lane into the YouTube chat, and we can see him there parked up and ready to go in the 17 privateer machine, and he's saying he's looking forward to a good night of racing. We're looking forward to seeing how Smithers gets on, always battling into the top 10, and we do love to see how he makes progress over the course of the race evenings. But one of the names we need to watch out for here in the number 34, the Briton Daniel Tufts. Now we always say watch out for him for the simple reason he has an absolutely magical way. He may not necessarily look the fastest out there in practice, but in qualifying he can spring a few surprises, or if it doesn't come to him in qualifying, you can suddenly see him jump all the way up inside the top 10 mid-race. Sometimes after the open lap he may start outside the top 10, and he's just there out of nowhere on what is a top 5 placement and battling hard for it. And can Tufts have a bit more fortune to go with him, because of course he's had a number of results which were looking very strong, only to fall away of a late instant. And of course we have to think back to what was Summit Point, if my memory serves me correctly, where Tufts were really putting in stellar performances and slightly undermined by incidents that cost him dear. But for today he'll be hoping those incidents are well at bay, as the pit lane is absolutely full. We have got only what is 10 seconds now before we say a checker flag to this final practice warm-up session, and all of our drivers are set as AJ Campbell makes his way out of the final corner for Artel Motorsport in the 92, heads across the line and up towards turn number 1. And well, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it is time for us to transition over to qualifying, and who will put it on pole here today, we're about to find out. So as we make our way into the 15-minute qualifying session, what can we expect here in terms of laps? Well, as our drivers make their way out the pit lane, track position here is going to be rather critical. We do have a number of overtaking opportunities, and of course in these Skippy machines, with this series aiming to keep the Skippy alive, we do normally see what is plenty of overtaking opportunities from corner to corner and lap to lap. But the opposite end of the spectrum is in the fact that around the mid to late half of the circuit, there is only really one natural racing line, and if you do put yourself off that line and onto the inside, you can defend quite aggressively to hold position, and therefore that means that you do ideally want to be towards the front. You want to get the best possible lap in, because fighting will cost you a lot of time, and when that's compounded, you may find yourself falling away from the pack that you want to go hunting or stay with over the entirety of the race. But as we do see here, Wade and what is Miles making the way down the back straight, and a lot of weaving side to side for our drivers already, all trying to get tyre temperature nice and early, because they know they haven't got long in this qualifying session in terms of the laps that are available to them as they make their way on through. We do seem to have lost our circuit map on the top right corner screen. We are trying to find it. We've put a lost and found search out for it, but meanwhile, taking things seriously here, all of our drivers now starting to get themselves set. They've had a run on down what was there near back straight, and now heading through the latter half a lap and getting themselves set and composed, and this is where it's all going to be go from this point onwards in terms of delivering. But as we do see, Wayne and Miles leading the pack on a round, and meanwhile a bit further back we have Pala Anzioso who returns today, and as he comes out of what is their turn at number 7 and onwards towards 8, a little bit of a wobble for the car behind, and I believe that was the 19 of Sebastian Holmichael that went wise. He tries to collect it back together, but as he comes on through the left into right, it turns 8 and 9, well in the glaring purple pink rims. You're not going to miss that car, and it is a nice livery on the machine, to be fair. Sometimes going for a bit of a rather unnatural colour does bode well. And can he find his way up through the order naturally rather than unnaturally as he comes down into the final corner, the last bend, and goes on to his first flying lap. Now, we will shortly ride on board with one of our drivers, or one or two of our drivers, to give you reference laps. But whilst they make their way around on their first laps to try to get themselves set up with tyre temperature, because of course it does normally take 2 to 3 laps to get the tyres in the ultimate operating window, and the brakes the same. A little bit of trivia for you with regards to this circuit. Now, you may be wondering what brought about this circuit, given the fact it's located in quite a remote region of Japan. Well, originally this circuit was built for the wealthy of the local area to be able to take their own private supercar machines and be able to go racing. Then you may be wondering, well, how on earth did a lot of the corners of this circuit get rather British names to the corners, such as Williams at turn number 2? Well, the reason being that very quickly word went out as of what was known at the time as the TI Ida circuit, now known as Okayama, of course, and when the word went out, a number of infamous British drivers decided to visit the circuit and take their cars for a spin there, and it gradually became a very popular circuit, and that's what led to the circuit playing host to 2 years worth of the Pacific Grand Prix in Formula 1 and 2 and 1 International Series that visited here, and well, that's the story behind it. But after the was the TI Corporation had to sell the circuit and hand it over to other private companies. Well, then the wealthy started to populate the circuit less and less, and the emphasis became more and more an international series, and then eventually international series moving to Suzuka and Fuji. The idea was they were domestic series that race around here. Indeed, you can visit this circuit. If you were to ever visit Japan today, you could visit the circuit, indeed take your own car around there. It is still a popular circuit, albeit it is quite far away from the hubble and bubble of, say, Tokyo in Japan. But as our drivers now make the way across the timeline here, we'll start to see our first laps come on the board. Well, Wade there currently sets the official pole time of 42.947. Meanwhile, Enzo Cantor, now there's an interesting one. Cantor, we haven't seen him in quite some time, but the 77 driver absolutely pushing up there to P2 immediately. And you may remember, of course, at Bathurst, where he did make one of the biggest racing rounds of his career in the season in terms of battling hard for the podium. And well, he's come out in full force here today, and we love to see it. But meanwhile, as Juan Rodriguez makes the way across the line, looking at my contact booth window, he's gone with P2 now on a 43.126. But definitely all of our drivers here feeling the temptation and feeling the speed to get themselves set as soon as possible. But as we do try to get our circuit map back on screen for you, ladies and gentlemen, and there it is. Our circuit map does rematerialise from the ether, and well, now you can keep track of where everyone's spaced out. But to do well here in terms of qualifying times, as we see some drivers getting it wrong, and that is Adam Miles, who's gone on around there at turn number 5. Well, to do well around here, you don't want to get it wrong like Miles has, but of course, to be a bit more specific, it's all about finding flow and positioning the car for the next corner, particularly in the opening section from turns 1 through to 4, where the continual direction change really does upset the balance of the car, and you need to be able to put it in the right place to be able to attack the course at the highest possible speed. And even in the middle to later sections, it's all about using the circuit whip and getting yourself ready to go onto the brakes and targeting those late apexes. So that's why it's a very technical circuit, because when you get it right, it's highly rewarding, but get it wrong and you find you lose a lot of speed, not just for one corner, but also the 2-3 corners that follow it. But as we jump on board here with Enzo Cantor, he'll take us around for a flying lap of the circuit, and we ride with him. Making his way across the timeline very shortly, heading up towards top gear as he makes his way into turn number 1 onto the brakes, about 150 metres from corner apex, third gear as he sweeps his way through, lets the car rolling out before bringing it over to the right hand side for turn number 2 at Williams, and they're braking 75 metres from apex entry and just letting it flow, where he returns to the throttle, third gear, and now powering up, heading in to the S sequence of bends as he comes through left, right, left through turn number 3. Of course, the King's flattening out here as he breaks his way shortly into turn 4, and you'll notice now the first apex is flat, but as he starts to clear into the second apex, always effectively and into the V-shaped corner, he has to go uphill, and this is where you need to carry the speed, because every mile now you lose going uphill, that is going to be compounded now as he makes his way down the back straight. That was turns 1 through to 4, up to 4th gear, shortly into 5th, as he gets ready to go onto the brakes into turn 5 hairpin, braking there at the 100 metre board on his left hand side down to first gear, one of the slightest corners on the circuit as he exits out, not using the full whip, got to get the car over to the right for turn number 6 and brake nice and early for turn 6, given the fact it's a downhill and the car rolls away off camera as he comes into 7. The circuit flattens out again, we really lose Cantor. Hopefully we're not going to lose him for too long as he makes his way out of 7 up towards turn number 8 and into the braking zone here, turns and points the car in nice and early, slides the car uphill at left hand and back on the throttle, bring the car to the left for turn number 9, and as he comes on in there, staying in first gear as he powers out, and now he can start to calm down as he heads out towards turn number 10, looks to his left hand side there for his turning point, which is the marshal's post, and he comes through 10 into the last bend at turn number 11, use all the entry whip, glide the car in third gear and use the exit curve to widen the corner out. It's a nice enter lap from Enzo Cantor, and what's it going to be as he heads across the timeline? He's currently P5 on a 43.18. Meanwhile, and that's 2.5 tenths off, he moves up to P2, and Geoff Randall goes provisional pole down to 42.432. As Gordon Wandenberger, meanwhile, currently in P2 and now 2 tenths off. So Randall raising the bar. And of course, with the bar being raised, others will respond to it, including the likes of Nathan Wade, and Wade a little bit further behind Randall at the moment. And while the two of them normally have gone together in qualifying, not part of the same team, albeit we should point out this is a drivers-only championship. There are no teams involved in terms of a teams points championship, but we do have drivers from teams out there in circuit who try to work together. And Slipstream has always played a critical part in each and every round, and it's going to be the same here in terms of the qualifying, in the fact we do have a couple of extended straights where having the toe will benefit you, but not as pronounced as, say, at Phillip Island last time out, where of course in Australia last week we really got to see that if you win the ultimate slipstream you can gain up towards a second on your ultimate qualifying lap if you were running in just clear air and nailing every apex. But as we see our drivers heading on through here, of course, the one place where you will not want that dirty air from being in the tub of another car is in the run through turn 6 through to 10. So it will unsettle the front end and cause a bit of understeer to creep on in. As Wade there taking very liberal use of the exit curve of turn number 7 for who can blame. He's trying to see where all the limits are, but meanwhile going even faster up the road from it, albeit he's had to exchange places with Cantor. It's Geoff Randall with purple sector 1 and improved personal best in sector 2. Sector 3 has not been quite the improvement he's wanted, but as he comes on down through 10 and into 11, will he be able to find it? And could we see him here potentially marshal his way into a low 42, perhaps even a 41s on the card, because keep in mind they will be burning some fuel out the cars as Randall comes to the timing line. It feels like an eternity to get there. What's it going to be as he crosses for Randall? It's not quite enough, a 2/10 of his previous best. I think he may feel as though he's impeded a little bit towards the end, as meanwhile Glacier moves up to P5, but he's demoted back to P6 by Paul Smithers, and Smithers there you can see in the number 24, well, in fact the number 17, a bit further behind there. The 24 we were mistaken him for was Nathan Wade. Well, Smithers right now leaving it till a bit later in the qualifying session, but started to build himself in, and being somebody who's left it, speaking of somebody I should say, who's left it very late, well, he's just made his way out onto circuit, is the other skipping racing machine of Chris Wayne, currently doing a warm-up lap as he makes his way between where it's turns 7 and 8. Well, he's got all the space to play with, so therefore you can understand why he's taking his time in the GSR machine as he comes through turn number 8, still waiting to get himself set, and Wayne only able to join at mid-qualifying, but to be fair, he will have an opportunity. He's got 5 minutes to go, so after he gets to the timeline, he is going to have what will be the best part of approximately 2 to 3 laps, depending on how quickly he gets up to speed. I think it is going to be more towards 2 now, given the fact, of course, we do not have overtime available in this qualifying session. When the clock strikes 15 minutes, that's it. If you're on a lap, it does not count. You need to get your lap done before the 15-minute clock strikes, but there, Wayne really slow, making his way through the final corner, so I wonder if he's got a technical issue with the car and he's trying to resolve it as he is getting himself up to speed. In fact, he's going to have to park up. I think Wayne has not got a car that wants to function with him. Well, can he get it fixed in time? As meanwhile, second place in the championship, second place on the provisional grid right now, Steffen Herrmann in the number 12, and well, the gleaming bright yellow machine makes its way up through 8 into 9, and as he does, he's currently a 10th off of Randall's time, and well, you can see there in terms of some surprises, Cantor repositions himself into P3 on a 42.619, but Nathan Wade goes to provisional pole. It's only by 700ths, but whether it's 700ths or 1,000th, winning is winning, and for Wade, he's moved up there with miles now, moving up to P2. Some more laps are coming in. The circuit is definitely rubbering in, and also those fuel tanks on drivers' cars are coming down, and now with that, plus also opportunistic tow, they are finding more and more time as Herrmann crosses the line. He goes P2, 3.5 hundredths off of Wade. He was purple in sector 3 and sector 4, so Herrmann right now could be looking for a pole position. Indeed, all the drivers here absolutely pushing hard, there's no question about it. Well, Steffen Herrmann makes his way out of turn at number 2. Well, the big question is, has he ever gained a pole position? And the answer is he has gained 1 pole position so far. The driver who's yet to get a pole inside what is that top 4 is Adam Miles in P3, and I think he'll feel like he can potentially find a pole position. And another one as well, look at the driver in P5, Daniel Tufts. He's only currently 1.5 tenths, if that, of the Wade's time, and with the top 5 separated by 1.5 tenths, that's a negligible margin in terms of it could swing in the favour of any driver at the moment. And I think Cantor feels like he's got another lap on the boil. As off camera at this point, Enzo Cantor starting to go a little bit faster. Oh goodness, we're in one drive, getting it wrong right in front, and that's the number 50 car, boys, Gordon van den Bergen taking a bit of a power slide heading to turn at number 8, but collecting the car back together. Well, I think van den Bergen having a bit of a calamity through the mid into latter portion of the lap, trying to settle the car back on down, but he's finally found it now as he comes down through 10 and in towards 11. But meanwhile, as he gets set to go, we do look to Enzo Cantor, who heads across the timing line. He was purple in sector 3, so still time out there, and Cantor goes P2. Meanwhile, Randall goes P1, and well, it would have been enough for Cantor to go P1, but Geoff Randall said, hold up a second, no, I'm going a bit faster than you, and well, the gap now to pole position is 2.5 hundredths, with Randall setting a 42.302, Cantor a 42.33, rounded to the nearest hundredth, but it is negligible margins here, and indeed it could still swing, as up into P4 goes Neil Gardner in the number 74, and was he makes his way through turns 1 and 2 in what is there the half and half livery machine. Of course, one side of the car being the Hornet, the other side being a throwback to the McLaren Honda Formula 1 livery, the infamous one, of course, on the MP4 machine. But as he makes his way up towards turn at number 4, well, right now Gardner up into P4, and it's only 1/10 that separates the top 5, with Miles a further 200ths off. This is the closest qualifying session we've seen for some time in terms of the fact it's the voracity of this field to be able to deliver these qualifying laps time and time again. Every driver here is finding time, and it's absolutely brilliant right now because it's keeping everyone on their toes. And well, in this championship we may have a firm favourite in the form of Nathan Wade in terms of the points advantage he's gained, but there's no firm favourites when it comes to qualifying in this series. It all comes down to whether you can find the perfect lap at the perfect time. Well, right now Enzo Cantor feels as though he may be just doing that. He's improved in subsector 2. Subsector 3 has been the best overall thus far, and Geoff Randall meanwhile doing personal best all the way round behind Cantor. Well, Randall of course your fastest man out there, so if he's improving he'll be going purple as he heads across the timeline, and as they make their way all the way towards turn number 1, what's it going to be? Cantor will go first on the tail, moves up to P1. Randall's not able to improve by comparison, or is he? No, he is able to improve there, and Randall goes P1 on the first and only 41 of this session, so 41.964. Cantor P2. Meanwhile, out there we can see Miles coming on through. Smithhurst goes P2. He puts himself on the front row for a brief moment, and Miles slowing down. Well, Miles' qualifying session is over, given the fact he's delivered his final lap, and Smithhurst put in the great lap. Juan Rodriguez meanwhile P8 improves on a 42.388. But Rodriguez not up there today in terms of the times, but inside the top 10, so I don't think you'll feel too ashamed of that. As meanwhile we look to Titus de Jong, who's in P6, and well, once again it does look as though the Dutchman are really surpassing expectations in terms of qualifying as he now cools it down on the back straight. But in terms of drivers yet to get on a round, well, we've only got one driver to put in lap, and that's Anders Nielsen, who'll be heading to the timeline very shortly. And how fast will the Dane be? He's currently P17, and does he improve here? He does, but he doesn't move from P17. It's the checker flag out, and it's Geoff Randall who's on pole for our first race of the day. As our drivers make their way to the grid for the round 13 sprint, this is how they'll line up in the Musical Money Skip Barber Change Trophy, brought to you by Gone Skipping Racing for 2023. Geoff Randall takes pole position for Gone Skipping Racing, joined on the front row by 1.5 temps by Paul Smithhurst. Behind them, the privateers of Enzo Cantor and Nathan Wade, with row number 3 going to the privateer of Adam Miles, joined by RT Racing's Titus de Jong. Then we have on row number 4 Neil Gardner and Firebird Sim Racing's Juan Rodriguez, and as we continue our way on down the order to complete the top 10, it'll be Steffen Herrmann and Daniel Tufts who round out P9 and P10 on the 5th row. Row number 6 goes to Gordon von den Bergen for Sickhead Racing and RT Racing's Rimco Plosia, with row number 7 then being contested by the pair of Rudy van der Meyden for STM and Paula Anziosa for Artel Motorsport Blue. On row number 8 is Sebastian Holmichael and Ryan Jackson, and our final complete row of the grid, P17, P18, it's the privateer Anders Nielsen on his debut, joined by AJ Campbell, and last but not least, starting P19 on the 10th row, it's Chris Wayne from Gone Skipping Racing. He may have joined late, but I think he'll find the pace as the race goes on. And well, everybody absolutely set as we see Geoff Randall there putting in the YouTube chat. Well, that was intense. It was an intense qualifying session. I think Randall right now may not quite believe he's on pole, given the fact he set his expectations a little bit lower in terms of what he was expecting going into tonight when we interviewed him only moments ago. But the field is set, ladies and gentlemen, and well, as our drivers all get themselves composed on the front rows, well, we wait to see what can happen into turn number 1, and will Paul Smithhurst, of course, in one of his best qualifying performances of the season. He'll be looking to try and get the run up the inside of Randall into turn 1, or will he prefer to try and look for it in the run down towards turn 4, given the fact there's more room at that point? Well, the grid is set, we await the lights. One red light, 2 red lights, 3 red lights, 4 red lights, 5 red lights. And it's lights out and away we go here at Okayama International Circuit for round 13 of the season. As they make their way down towards turn 1, it's Randall gets a great start. Paul Smithhurst behind, and meanwhile Cantor and Wade also tucking on in. A little bit further back, we do seem to have 2-3 wide in the run on through. But as they power their way on down, we can see they're a bit further back, Rodriguez versus Gardner. But as they all now come into Williams' corner, it settles down for a brief moment. Steffen Herrmann losing a place. Offline with Gordon von den Bergen still tucked in behind. As they come through the left-hander, turn number 2 and up towards 4 they charge. Where you can see von den Bergen still tucking in into this battle between Tufts versus Herrmann. Both drivers there looking to make progress. Tufts in particular as they head onto the brakes into the uphill right-hander of 4. And Tufts gets the position covered off. But meanwhile, at the front of the field, after the first 4 corners already, Smith has started to go for it. Meanwhile, it's Cantor who's coming up behind. He's going to try and make it 3 wide in the run down the back straight. It is 3 wide at this point. Now it's going to be Randall on your right, Cantor in the middle, and Smithhurst on your left. Smithhurst backs out and puts it behind as the meanwhile Cantor up the inside into turn 5. And as he goes on the brakes there, Enzo Cantor takes the lead as Randall then being given the elbow out by Smithhurst, but Smithhurst now trying to cut around the outside of Cantor into turn number 6. It gets very close there, but great respectful racing between them all as they come down through turn 6 into 7. And Nathan Wade is still side by side with Miles, and of course Miles and Wade, two opposite ends in terms of Wade's got the pace, Miles has got the consistency when it comes to longer races, it would seem. But as they come through here in the sprint, well, both drivers right now pushing and equaling one another, but it is Wade who's behind Miles as they come up and through at turn number 9 for the first time, albeit we've got plenty of laps to go. So right now this order is no sign of how it's going to be come the end of the next lap or come the end of the next sequence of corners, but as they make their way on downhill into turn number 11 to go on to what's lap number 2. Well, after one lap it is Enzo Canto who leads by what is 3.5 tenths ahead of Paul Smith. Oh goodness me, there's been an instant further back, cut the full for a brief man. That's Remco Placer who's just missed the wall by inches there, and we'll take a look back at that very shortly as to how that happened. But after one lap it's Enzo Canto who leads the privateer from Italy. He's ahead of Paul Smith as P2, Geoff Randall P3, followed by Adam Miles P4, Nathan Wade P5, and then it's Neil Carter in P6, holding on versus Juan Rodriguez in P7, and then we do have Steffen Herrmann P8, Titus de Jong P9, and Daniel Tufts completes your top 10. Gordon Vandenberg P11 and starting to break away as best of the rest of the second racing, with Roddy Vandermaiden freeing up the rear field in terms of P12 backwards for STN as he looks to fight versus Sebastian Holmaker as they head uphill once more. But meanwhile, I think we had a bit of an instant, that's a car pointing the wrong way, and that's Juan Rodriguez who's gone around at turn number 4. There looks to be damage on the car, so I think there's a bit more of a story to this than meets the eye as he is towed to the pits. Well, we'll find out about that shortly. But meanwhile, looking at the front of the field, Smithhurst trying to look for a move round the outside of Cantor into turn number 5. Can't quite find it at the moment as they come up through towards turn number 6, but coming on down into the brakes, it's a short run. And meanwhile, Miles, he's on the inside of Geoff Randall, and he'll get that covered off a P3 as the 85 driver now has 2 places between himself and the front spot. But as Wade there goes a bit away, he's got to be careful. That, of course, that'll be an addition to his instant point count as they come up towards turn number 8 and 9. But Wade definitely trying to push hard in this mid portion of the lap. I think he feels so he needs to start making progress, and in particular he wants to be tucked in behind Miles, who seems to be his equal as they head down towards turn number 10. Coming through the double right complex now to complete the lap, where everybody's settling down into line of stern sequence for a brief moment. Meanwhile, Daniel Tufts still looking for the move. In fact, he's fallen behind Gordon Vandenbergen. Now, I wonder if Tufts was involved in the incident potentially with Rodriguez, as Rodriguez in the pit lane still being repaired at this time, and I believe they are going to try and get the car back out to avoid it being a retirement. But as Tufts builds up the speed here in towards turn number 1, we ride on board him as he attacks the circuit for the 3rd time under race conditions. A bit of a lock up there on the left hand side for Vandenbergen, catches the car, it goes to the ground on the end. Tufts going to look around the outside and onto the brakes they go. Vandenbergen still fighting it hard, but Tufts simply uses the radius of the corner to his advantage. But now it's going to be a side-by-side run through turn number 3, through the S as they head up towards turn number 4. But Tufts has got the critical position. He's on the inside into the braking zone. Going round the outside at turn number 4, it's possible, but you've got to have an advantage under braking. You need to have your nose ahead, but Tufts gets the move done for now. It's going to be the run down the back straight, which I think can switch things around. But as they make their way down towards turn number 5, we continue to focus on this battle for a brief moment. And in fact, before we do, we look back to the front. It's 3 wide again in the battle to turn number 5 with Cantor ahead, and then we look back to where Tufts versus Vandenbergen, and this time Vandenbergen steps back ahead with Tufts backing off there under braking. But right now, if you're in a run down towards turn number 5 with another car, you're definitely looking at swapping positions, it would seem. And as they make their way in towards turn 7, 8 and 9, Tufts just staying there and looking threatening versus Vandenbergen, albeit a little bit near miss there as he comes out the corner. In fact, side to side, I think Tufts here trying to find a bit more tyre temperature as he goes deep. Well, something wrong with the car. Good as being Vandermaiden looking up the inside to the outside of turn number 9. Well, Vandermaiden's not wasting any time in. I think he wants Tufts to get a move on, but Tufts definitely falling back. I mean, is there an issue with the car? Given the fact he's had to do that weaving, I think, to try and see if there is an issue. And, well, he's not quite on the pace of Vandenbergen at this moment, but we'll see come the end of the next lap. But speaking of issues and difficulties, let's take a look back at what happened to Remco Placer at the end of lap number 1. So as he was making his way down here into last bend, well, I think this may have been his own volition as he came through the corner. Rear of the car stepped out. Rear left tyre's gone on to the gravel on the exit, and he's just stopped it in front of the wall by literally a hair's width. And then going a little bit onto lap number 2, where the instant for Juan Rodriguez coming uphill into turn number 4. Now, what happened here to the number 9 from Spain for Firebird Sim Racing on the brakes? The rear's let go there. He's just coming a little bit too hard. Oh, goodness. And then there's been contact with one of the RT racing machines. We're not quite sure who that is. I think that is Roddy Vandermeer who he made contact with, and for Rodriguez, that damage upsetting the car, and that's why he's had to be towed to the pits. But as we return to your live pictures now, of course, still plenty of racing to go, and well, we look here back to the leaders and Miles versus Cantor, with Smithhurst falling behind now, and I think Smithhurst just playing the waiting game here. Of course, when you're battling like this, and indeed you can't really break away from the pack in front, and we saw it at the Phillip Island Grand Prix circuit last week. Well, it was, if you're in that lead pack, it was better to just stay together and try to avoid fighting and let the drivers behind who are fighting fall away, and then you make it a more concentrated battle for the win in either the sprint or the feature race. But I think right now Miles wants to be the leader, and Cantor also insists on being the leader, so neither driver wanting to give in here. And well, when you do have two drivers who are stubborn, of course, as a racing driver, you always want to be the leader no matter what, but sometimes you've got to put that firm tactical head on and say, you know what, it's not worth my time leading right now, and that's exactly what I think Smithhurst is doing. P3 as the drivers all make the way a little bit wide there at turn number 11. That shows you how hard they're pushing it off of the corner, but also on top of that, just how slidey these machines are with these cool ambient conditions. And in towards turn number 1 they go. Miles looking around the outside. Bit of contact there with Cantor, and well, Miles takes to the gravel as they head up back onto circuit, and Miles right now in towards P4 as a result of that. It was a small tap, but meanwhile it's going wrong for Smithhurst. Smithhurst into the wall, coming out of turn number 2, and the driver who looked at playing it all patiently, it's all ended in disaster as now he lets the field come on through, and he tries to get the car turned around, but I think that whack to the tyre barrier will have only damaged the suspension. This may be a slow drive to the pit, albeit he's got a long way round, of course, because he's only on the exit of turn 2 into 3, but for Paul Smithhurst it's a disastrous moment. And what exactly happened? Well, we start off with what happened to Adam Miles. We ride on board here with Miles to see the perspective from his car, and it was a tiny bit of contact that upset Miles' machine, and then for Paul Smithhurst only moments later coming into turn number 2 on the apex curve there, and we're just taking a bit too much curve, upset the car. And these curves, of course, they look relatively flat, but they are inverted away from the circuit, and what that means is they start off in line with the circuit's elevation, and then they very aggressively slope upwards as we return to live pictures. Smithhurst trying to recover, meanwhile Miles having a defender into turn number 8. We'll hold the thought about the curbs and tell you more about them very shortly, because what's more interesting right now is the battle way through turn at number 9, and Miles here trying to fend off Wade and Randall, and it's almost as if he wants the right, if he can't find a way past Cantor by default, then he wants the right to be P2 for now and go for the fight come the very end. But as they briefly calm it down, just to finish the thought on the curbs, when the curve slopes upwards and away from the circuit, it does mean that when you put a tyre up onto the curb and you're going through a corner such as the left-hander at turn number 2, it does lead to the car becoming very imbalanced, and particularly the opposite end tyres in terms of the ones furthest on the curb, so the right-hand side tyres in that instance for Smithhurst really do start to light up and they start to lose grip. But that is the challenge which our drivers face. So they want to use a little bit of curve, but not too much on those apexes. A lot of raised curves here, and as Miles follows on through, no mistakes this time for any of the drivers coming through turn at number 2. Everybody keeping it calm and collected, but Enzo Cantor definitely right now making a point that he wants to lead, and he does not want to yield at the very front of the field as they head on to the back stretch. But I think here again it will be the challenge that confronts him in terms of having to defend him for such a long run as they head on down. And of course this run in a GT3 class machine is a very short one, but in the Skippies it is a very long run, and therefore it opens up a load of opportunities. And meanwhile Miles looks around the outside, Cantor just defends, makes his car as wide as possible. Miles I think trying to go all in now into turn 6. Cantor has to give him the space, the two of them there almost touching wheels as they come from the left-hander of 7. Well, Miles may have this, and as he comes on out, he's going to get a nose ahead, and I think Cantor is going to look for the return up the inside. Miles squeezing him to the apex there, and Cantor goes in as much as he can. A small tap to the rear of Miles' car, but then Cantor does lose the place, and in return Miles takes the lead. Meanwhile Randall versus Herrmann, as they make the way through turn number 9 and up towards 10. Steffen Herrmann definitely getting his gloves out with regards to pushing on hard as they make the way down through 10 and in towards 11, and Randall under absolutely intense pressure as he heads on to the next lap. Well, they roll the way out the corner. We ride on board here looking back from the rear of the 107 machine, and the Briton right now going defensive into 1 already. It's a long run down the start finish straight, and Randall now bringing himself back into the race, and I think respecting the fact that he needs the toe of Wade on the straight to keep it safe rather than giving in. And Steffen Herrmann, they get a better run through turn 1 into 2. Thinks about cutting it back, but then Randall covers him off as they make their way through the left-hander, where it's going to be a brief lull here as both trying to figure it out as they come through the S's at turn 3 and in towards 4. Meanwhile, we've got battles at plenty also at the bottom end of the top 10 to the right to be inside the top 10, we should really say. And in particular, here is Daniel Tusk, P9. He's trying to hold off what is there. So Brody van der Meerden with, he's got Sebastian Holmichael in front of him, so it's a battle for P8, and Holmichael, who has gained 7 places since the start of this race, the biggest gainer of them all, with the number 19 driver who's got his work cut out. And if he can hold on to this P8 come the finish, that will be a huge achievement for him as he makes his way on down. But Tufts is going to take a look up the inside. Holmichael not able to defend as being, well, you can see that is De Jong and Brody van der Meerden looking for opportunities as well. De Jong in particular trying to cut it to the inside of van der Meerden, gets it done. Also tries to go for a double there versus Holmichael, but Holmichael sees it's coming and just defends it into turn number 6, holds the line tight. But as they come through left hand out, Wilman, he loses a bit of momentum versus Daniel Tufts, and Tufts could have an opportunity to try and break away as he looks to go hunting after Gordon van der Bergen in P7, who's just cut his way through the camera frame. But as they come through the left into right turns 8 and 9, well, meanwhile Ryan Jackson's closed up, and this so is Anders Nielsen and also Chris Wayne as they come through the right hander down towards turns 10 and 11 they go. Of course, the gradual plummet now on the circuit, with the elevation change being a very slight in comparison to other circuits that we've seen over the season. But you do feel it as a driver, particularly when the corner is off camber at turn number 11. Causes the car to just want to go naturally a little bit deep with some understeer. But as they all power their run down, we've still got one Rodriguez in the pit lane. And I do believe for Rodriguez, they will not be able to get the car repaired. They've tried as much as they can, but they'll look to get the Firebird Sim Race machine repaired for the second race of the day and make sure he has an opportunity to get back out there and achieve some redemption. But meanwhile, for Michael holding on for now versus De Jong. Roddy van der Meerden also in the mix as we jump on board with the Dutchman from Team STN. And as he heads out towards turn number 4, I think for van der Meerden at this point, it's all about picking the right time. Backing off there, interestingly, through 3 and into 4. The door was open. He was gaining a lot of pace on what was Titus De Jong. De Jong having also a slide there as he came through 4. And now as they make the way down the back straight, well, van der Meerden's going to have a golden opportunity here to carry all the speed he can. It's going to be a long run as they head on down, and Holmichael defends. Meanwhile, we have van der Meerden looking through the middle. He's going to try to part the seas like Moses, but will it work out in practice as they come on down? Well, De Jong going as late as he can on the outside. He's got the natural racing line, but he has to give space there so as not to cut off the nose of van der Meerden's car. And Holmichael still on the left as van der Meerden side by side with Holmichael coming down. But De Jong has definitely got the move done there for P9 for now. Holmichael around the outside. And meanwhile, we can see Jackson now getting a better run out of turn number 7. And well, with that in mind, van der Meerden losing more than he's gained as he drops back to P12. He's lost out significantly and falls backwards, and Jackson blocks him off there as they make their way to turn number 9 and says, no, you've lost your chance, now I'm going hunting. And well, I think the Dutchman may be wondering, how on earth I just lost 2 places for the price of trying to gain 2. Well, as they make their way down towards the turn number 11, he'll be looking back after the race and thinking about that one in preparation for the feature, but he's still got time to go with 6 minutes remaining, what equates to, with a lap they're going on to approximately 4 more laps of racing as they charge their way towards turn number 1. Meanwhile, Chris Wayne started to get in the mix versus Nielsen as they head into 1. Out the inside, Wayne goes, number 69 driver there. He may have started from the back of the field, but he's picking up the pieces where he can, makes the move. He's made it stick for now, but Nielsen, to be fair, will have the run onto the back straight if he nails it through turn number 4. But Wayne started to open up a little bit of a gap as much as he dared, try to push it as they come up towards the turn 4 corner. We'll onto the race very shortly, and for Wayne it will all be about corner exit, which will give him the opportunity to potentially keep Nielsen at bay and then go hunting after van der Meerden and Jackson, and also Holmichael for a P10 finish. And of course, P10 the coveted position when you're in these types of battles, it will put you on reverse grip pole for the feature. But meanwhile, we look from them to Steffen Herrmann, who right now falling down the order 2 at degrees, a little bit of wheel rubbing there versus what is, I do believe, Geoff Randall was the two make the way through 6 into 7. Left-hander they go, and as they do, still too wide through the entirety of the corner. Brilliant respect being shown between the pair, and you can see Neil Gardner thinking about making it 3 wide into the next corner. Well, he goes for it there to try and force Herman and get him to go deep, but it doesn't quite work, and Herman defends, but Randall's going to have it outside to inside as they come up through turn number 9 in towards 10. still too wide they go, and we'll keep it clean, boys, but I'm sure they will as they make the way into the right. Randall's still on the inside there. Herrmann can't quite close the door, and Randall's still trying to force the issue. He does get ahead, but will Herrmann be able to get the cut back here on corner exit? Well, 2 wheels to the gravel there. It's going to slow to a degree, but Herrmann's still carrying the momentum. He's going to have to run up the inside as they make the way onto lap number 10 under race conditions in the sprint. As they head in towards turn number 1, I think Steffen Herrmann will finally get this done, or will he there as Randall looks at the cut back versus Steffen Herrmann, but Herrmann finally positions the car well enough to make sure Randall can't make it too wide any longer. But brilliant racing between the pair for P4, and as they make the way out, Herrmann runs a bit wide, but he still keeps it on the tarmac as he heads out towards turn number 4 and further back. Ryan Jackson versus Ronnie Vandermeiden, with Vandermeiden on the left hand side coming out the outside of turn 2. Jackson trying to make it too wide all the way out towards 4, with Smash and Hole Michael Slipstream there buffed in his performance, and they make the way up towards the right hander, and uphill they go. Well, Jackson's still on the outside. He's actually going to lose a bit of speed here with the way the road surface canvas out, and as they make the way in towards the back straight now, Jackson will have the double toe. He's got to be mindful of the fact it's a long run. In return, he eats the time that's right. Well, he thinks he's got it right by going early. Meanwhile, Vandermeiden the same now as he starts to deploy all the speed he's picked up, and then Vandermeiden up through the middle of the pair. Can he get it done? Oh, I think he can, but Jackson gets a better run off of the turn 5 apex, and as they go to turn 6, Vandermeiden defends into 6, and that will be the door shut for now. Already Vandermeiden goes to the middle of both, but what is Jackson? Holdmichael takes P10, and with these guys scrambling for that position, given the fact it will be the reverse group pole shortly, and they all want it. Jackson looking for a return move into turn number 8 now, and Vandermeiden sees it's coming and says, okay, well, just take the inside into turn number 9. There's nothing you can do about it. Jackson tries to squeeze into the apex, but in the end, they still have to go too wide as they make the way down towards turn number 10. Through the right hander they go, and well, a little bit of bump over the curve there for Vandermeiden. That's going to cost him some speed and upset the suspensions. They make the way through the final corner. 2 more laps to go. Jackson holds P10 for now, but will it be that way come the end of the next lap? And of course, the most important one is the one at the checkered flag. Already Vandermeiden trying to come back a bit onto the next lap. They charge, and as they do, up the inside, Holdmichael also try to look for the move. There's contact with Jackson. A little bit of wobble there. Holdmichael immediately backs off to try and make sure the instant does not become a disaster. And as they come through turn number 2, Holdmichael there in lifted off will fall back towards Chris Wayne. Wayne now trying to get into the mix as they head out towards turn number 4, and we jump aboard with the number 69 driver. Now powering on through here and out towards the right hander. Well, of course, Wayne will have seen just how close the trio in front of him are battling, but he does have Anders Nielsen right behind him. So for Wayne, he's got to worry about the fact the pressure will be building as they power their way down the back straight. If he can't get this move done soon, then Nielsen may be looking to take an opportunity off of him. And as they head in towards the next braking zone, well, we can see there everybody started to settle down, albeit Holdmichael feels he's got to go defensive still versus Wayne. A lock up there for what is Vandermeiden in P10. So already Vandermeiden definitely pushing hard. Wayne looks up the inside into turn number 6. Holdmichael goes a bit deep there. What is the threat of the move from Wayne? In turn they go. Jackson losing the rear end in front. Smoke kicked up there from the slide. And Wayne and Holdmichael stay as they were. No gain as they head up towards turn number 8. And we're on to the brakes, they make it, and as they come out to the corner, Jackson really struggling there as he heads out towards turn 9. I think Brian Jackson may have just overheated the tyres, and now he's trying to get the tyre temperatures down, but he needs to push harder. He does not want to fall away from Vandermeiden, who will be given literally an open goal to run it home in P10 going on to the final lap. Speaking of going on to the final lap, well, here's your race leader of Adam Miles. He heads in towards turn number 1, and as he comes on through, he does have Nathan Wade and Enzo Cantor, but ever since taking the lead of this race, Miles has put enough of space between himself and his peers in order to be able to look comfortable. 6/10 is the gap as they make the way up towards turn number 4, and I suspect a little bit of battling between Wade and Cantor has also worked out in his favour, but the point is that Miles right now is absolutely delivering here as he comes up through turn number 4, the long right, and onto the back straight, and will Wade and Cantor taking 2 very different lines to one another, with what was Wade taking a much more traditional line, meanwhile Cantor taking a deeper line to try and get all the speed he can onto this back stretch. And in the rear of the picture you can see where's Herrmann versus Randall, and well, we look to them as it looks to the battle for the top 3 has taken a brief hiatus, but meanwhile Randall versus Herrmann into turn number 5, onto the brakes they both go. Randall being made to work around the outside, Herrmann covers him off, and Herrmann does a brilliant job there letting the car drift into the inside of turn 6, and it means that Randall has to try and swing the car back in a cutback into turn 7. He can't find it, and Herrmann just simply puts the car there and says if you want to come on through you're going to have to find another way, but Randall there obscured and blocked by what's Herrmann getting wrong. And up the inside goes Neil Gardner. Neil Gardner makes it 3 wide under braking. They go for the left-hander, and Gardner takes 2 for 1 into the corner, but Herrmann comes back as they make their way through turn number 1. Herrmann's not giving in. He's insisting P4 is his. But meanwhile, we must look from them, ladies and gentlemen, to your race leader, for as he makes his way out of the final corner, well, Adam Miles has brought the pace to the race, and as he heads to the timeline, it's going to be a drag race, but he's going to get it done. Adam Miles takes the win in the 85 to win the round 13 sprint at Okayama ahead of Nathan Wade and Enzo Cantor. That's your podium. Steffen Herrmann holds on to P4 in the end in spectacular fashion versus Neil Garner, Geoff Randall P6, Daniel Tufts P7, Gordon Vandenberg P8, Titus de Jong at P9, Rudy van der Meyden P10 ahead of Ryan Jackson, with Sebastian Holmichael P12, and then it will be Chris Wayne and Anders Nielsen P13, P14, with Remco Placer P15, AJ Campbell P60 as he comes to line, Paolo Anzioso P17, with the Arto Motorsport drivers having a difficult start to the proceedings today. And then last but not least, making his way on around for the last couple of quarters, he'll be our last finisher out of 19 starters. We'll have 18 finish on the lead lap and 1 retirement for Juan Rodriguez after that instant on the opening 2 laps. But Smithhurst coming on down. And as he makes his way for the final 2 corners, knowing he has got race-winning pace here, it didn't quite work out in the first race with that mistake at turn 2, but he'll look to right the wrongs as he goes into the feature, but he'll have to start from P18 to do so. He heads to the line and rounds off the field at P18 there in what's been an absolutely brilliant first race of the day in the second half of the season. Indeed, such battling up and down the field, and as our drivers are given the 5-minute comfort break, let's take you through those finishing positions subject to any Stewards inquiries. Win round 13 of the Skip Barber Challenge Trophy, brought to you by Gonskipping Racing and sponsored by Musical Money, hosted on iRacing. We can see that Adam Miles taking the win in the sprint at Okayama ahead of Nathan Wade by 4 attempts, and then Enzo Cantor a further 3 attempts back, rounding off the podium. Steffen Herrmann at P4, they're not quite able to finish on the podium, but I think we'll be proud of his achievements to keep Neil Garner and Geoff Randall at bay, with Neil Garner sneaking ahead of Randall come the end, but Randall finishing P6 after taking pole position. The Gonskipping Racing driver battling hard for the podium, but finding himself falling back into the second pack. Daniel Tufts P7 there, and another solid performance for the 34 driver, ahead of Gordon Vandenbergen for Sickhead Racing, and then Titus de Jong P9 for RT Racing, ahead of Roddy van der Meyden, who completed the top 10, and as a result, the STN driver will take the reverse grid pole position for the round 14 feature that's coming up shortly. Best of the rest, Ryan Jackson P11 in the Shell V-Power Privateer machine, just missing out on the top 10, with Sebastian Holmichael P12 behind him by 7/10 of a second, and on his goodness me, on a charge through the field, Chris Wayne at P13 for Gonskipping Racing, ahead of debutant Anders Nielsen, not quite on the pace of the top 10, but battling well for P14. Then Remco Placer completing the top 15 for RT Racing, with Arto Motorsport and Arto Motorsport Blues, AJ Campbell and Paolo Anzioso P16, P17, with the team having difficulty in the first race, not quite on the pace. They'll look to remedy that in between the races. And then as we look down to P18, our final finisher on the lead lap, Paul Smithhurst there, the privateer, after that unfortunate early instant, putting him all the way to the back of the field, but he never gave up, and Juan Rodriguez with that instant on lap number 2. The Firebird Sim Racing driver had to take the early retirement and not able to get the car out of the grid, but hopefully we will see the number 9 repaired and fighting fit to go again, albeit in the feature he's going to have to come all the way from the back if he wants to try and be on the podium or take the win. But it has been done before, ladies and gentlemen, and well, could Rodriguez find a way to do it again? But as our drivers get themselves set, we do look to those that make their way out of the circuit, and well, what a first race of the day. It was an absolute thriller from start to finish, and Roddy van der Meyden really working overtime to make his way into P10. And I think for him, he's going to be absolutely beaming with pride in the fact that he was able to sneak his way into a position that everybody was fighting hard for from start to finish in that group. Van der Meyden just able to make it his own with a lap to go and never looked back after that. As he makes his way up towards turn number 4, Ryan Jackson just missing out by comparison, but of course for Jackson his full process will now go to, okay, I've started just outside the top 10, how much ground can I make, and can I follow some of the faster drivers on through when we do go green flag racing? Because of course with it being a 40-minute feature race, the pace will lessen to a degree with a lot of fuel saving being on the cards for our drivers, and therefore it could mean that some of the slower drivers, if they're able to bolt on to the fastest drivers who've been reverse gridded into the mid-pack based on the finishing positions of the sprint, well, we could see some unexpected names gradually tying the way up the order. But we also do look to Juan Rodriguez, and they've got the car repaired. He's currently doing some test runs on the Firebird sim racing machine, and the Spaniard definitely falling short, albeit under his own impetus at turn number 4. Unfortunate, and then that nasty knock from the RT racing machine of what was, I do believe it was not Remco Pleiss who made the contact in the end. We are just trying to, it was Titus de Jong who made the contact, but for the number 9 driver, it wasn't the way he wanted it to end, and now he'll be looking to get a restart, reset the mind, and get himself comfortable and set to go racing it once again. And as we do look to Paul Smithhurst, meanwhile, another driver who will look to try and recover his way through the order from P18. And Paul Smithhurst is a fast driver. He's no stranger to cutting his way through the field. He does have a lot of overtaking opportunities available to him on this circuit, and he'll be finding them. Indeed, we saw him battling hard for the lead in race 1 before it all went wrong. And, well, can he turn those wrongs into rights? That will be the change that faces him. We're just under a minute to go. We're not going to quite bring you an interview from our drivers at this time, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to let them focus on getting themselves set now for going racing. But what can we expect in our second race of the day? Well, what we can indeed expect is a change of fuel saving from our drivers here, in the fact that it is going to feel a very long race. There are a number of extended straights, also a number of lift and coast zones between corners where drivers may be able to take some fuel out of the running of the car and therefore shorten their pit stop. And indeed, we have seen some drivers be able to save up to 6 seconds in the pit through excessive fuel saving. Of course, some decide to underfuel the car and then look to lift and coast it all the way to the end, potentially falling into a pack and saving fuel and going battling right at the end. Well, that's going to be on the strategy. All the strategy calls will now be in place for, as we see Van den Bergen making his way to the final corner. He'll be taken back into the pit lane. The checker flag is out, and therefore it's time for us to head to the grid for our second race here at Okayama. So as our drivers make their way onto the grid, this is how they line up for the round 14 feature race of the Skip Barber Challenge Trophy for 2023 at Okayama International. Roddy van der Meyden takes pole position, reverse grid pole for the STN driver, joined on the front row by Titus de Jong for RT Racing. Behind them on row number 2, it's Gordon van den Bergen for Sickhead Racing and Daniel Tufts the privateer, with row 3 being followed up by Gone Skipping Racing's Geoff Randall and Neil Gardner. Steffen Herrmann and Enzo Cantor, the 2 privateers, will line up together on row number 4, with the top 10 being completed on the 5th row by Nathan Wade and the sprint race winner of Adam Miles. On row number 6, it's Ryan Jackson and Sebastian Holmichael, both drivers looking to get inside the top 10, unquestionable. And then as we look outside of what is the top 12, it's then going to be on the 7th row, Chris Wayne for Gone Skipping Racing and the privateer Anders Nielsen. They'll be looking to try and gain a few more places in the second race of the day. We're in cool place for RT Racing and Arto Motorsport's AJ Campbell completing the top 16 on the 8th row. And then Paula Anziosa for Arto Motorsport Blue and Paul Smithhurst on the 9th row. And then starting last but not least on row number 10, P19, it's Firebird Sim Racing's Juan Rodriguez. But as all of our drivers put themselves on the grid once again and get set to go racing, well, it's going to be a more strategic one here, as we do have a couple of slots that are currently absent of drivers as they're just cooling down. And I think thinking about what they can do, making sure there's the right amount of fuel in the car, they know what their strategy and perhaps their plan B needs to be. But place your bets, ladies and gentlemen, because it is definitely now going to be one of those races not to miss, and I think it will go down to the very last lap for the win. And when we do see their tears from Mid-Racer 77, that's Paul Smithhurst in the YouTube chat with regards to his first race of the day going so very wrong in the early stages. But as the grid is set, we now wait for the lights. I think we only have one more driver to take to his spot on the grid, and I think they just have, I think it was Adam Miles, and we are only 10 seconds away from lights out. The grid set, it's time for lights. 1 red light, 2 red lights, 3 red lights, 4 red lights, 5 red lights. And it's lights out and away we go for our second race of the day here in Japan as Roddy van der Meyden gets a good start and looks to stay clear of Titus de Jong. De Jong having a slow start by comparison, and Gordon van den Bergen immediately looking up the inside into turn 1. Van den Bergen going all in, but he can't quite find as they sweep their way through the opening corner. Charging up to Williams Bennett, turn number 2, and you can see here Geoff Randall on the offensive already, trying to look around the outside of Daniel Tufts, with Neil Garner by comparison being forced backwards as the New Zealanders they head out towards turn number 4. As they power their way on that throw, we see Ryan Jackson as well losing out, considering losing 2 places off the line as he's been forced back to P13 by the gains of Wayne and Sebastian Holmichael. Holmichael absolutely charging. A lock up there for Palanzioso as he catches the car, and we've got a car as well. That's Sebastian Holmichael who's gone round at turn number 4. So turn 4 claiming another victim, but this time it's Holmichael. But as they make their way back up to speed, meanwhile looking to lead us here, well figuring it out in terms of this 3 wide with Van der Meijden being given an opportunity to break away. It's going to be Randall on the inside, Tufts in the middle, and Ronenbergen on the outside as they break the way into the right-hander. And as they come through, Randall gains 2 places, so the price of 1 braking zone. Nice move from Randall. Tufts meanwhile holding on to P3, but Randall absolutely charging. He's trying to bolt before the rest of the field catches up. I think Randall feels though he's got race winning pace, but he needs to get clear before he sees the likes of Enzo Cantor and Wade and Miles close up. As they come into turn number 8. Meanwhile, Cantor trying to look around the outside of Steffen Herrmann, and we do know, of course, that Herrmann able to make his car so very wide through this latter half of corners as they come through turn number 9. Wade also looking at the inside of Titus de Jong, and de Jong goes a bit deep, coming through 9 into 10. As they come into the last 2 right-handers to complete the opening lap, I think de Jong's going to have to let this one go and let Miles tuck in behind him as they all settle down and come to the end of lap number 1. So after 1 lap, it's Roddy van der Meijden who leads to STN ahead of Geoff Randall in P2, Daniel Tuss P3, Colin van der Bergen P4, Neil Garner in P5, followed by Steffen Herrmann, and it's Enzo Cantor, Nathan Wade, Titus de Jong and Adam Miles who complete your top 10. Meanwhile, Miles looking at the inside of Titus de Jong into the opening corner, so they swap places now. De Jong's at the bottom end of the top 10, with best it's Chris Wayne in P11. But as they come in towards turn number 2, line the stern up once more, and everybody now trying to jump on board the fuel-saving train, if you will, as we see a car running wide there. I believe that's Paul Smithhurst just adventuring with track limits. Paul Smithhurst, one of the biggest gainers at the start of this race, gaining 5 off the starting block. Sebastian Holmichael conversely dropping down to the back of the field. We have the spin at turn number 4 on the opening lap, and in fact we can find out what exactly happened to Sebastian Holmichael as we do have a replay. He's making his way through the kinks of 3 in the S and into 4. Keeping your eye on what is there, the purple black machine, under braking, much like what happened to Rodriguez, just coming in too hot and the car letting go, and Anzioso almost following him, but not quite so. But for Sebastian Holmichael, quick. Whereas meanwhile, Paul Smith, as we return to the live pictures, and the MOV racing machine, it's lost its front wing. What on earth has happened there? That's completely unexpected, and it's the worst possible outcome. Now he'll lose the front downforce on the car, and he'll have to try and limp it back to the pits and go for a fast repair, but it'll be way too soon for him to consider this being his one and only stop for fuel today. As meanwhile AJ Campbell battling side by side with Anders Nielsen as they head up through turn number 8. Campbell on the outside for Arton Motorsport, and the German falling back behind the Danishman as they come up through 9. And Wunae's got the pressure of Palianzioso for Arton Motorsport. Blue is getting much closer of quarter exit as they head into turn number 10. Down they go towards the last corner, and as they do, well, they'll settle down for now, but I think Anzioso wants to try and gain a little bit more before he settles into position here, given the fact he's shown a bit more pace at this point in the race. But heading on towards turn number 1, meanwhile, we look to Ryan Jackson, who finds himself in a 3-wide battle there with de Jong and Remco Pleister. In fact, de Jong's up the road, we should correct ourselves, that is with Pleister up the inside, and then we do have Chris Wayne behind, and well, Jackson holds off the pair of them for now as they make their way through turn number 2. Now as he comes on through what is the left-hander and up towards turn number 4, he charges. We can also see Juan Rodriguez looking for a move, can't quite find as the 5-foot sim racing driver is essentially given a firm no you don't from what is Wayne as they head through 3 and into 4. But Rodriguez starting to tease out potential moves, and I think also thinking when will be the right time for him to look at fuel saving, or even coming into the pits early to try and undercut the field. So of course the undercut, quite a powerful strategy that we've seen over the season if it's time to the right moment. But meanwhile we look back up inside the top 10. This is Neil Garner, Steffen Herrmann into turn number 5. Well, there I thought Garner was going to close home a bit too much, but he gave him just enough room. Brilliant race as they make their way through 6 and into 7. Down they go. It's a runway for Herrmann, and Garner's going to be there. But meanwhile, up the inside as it all unfolds, and Garner into the side of Steffen Herrmann. And I believe that was Enzo Cantor who came roaring through. And well, if so, Enzo Cantor finding a lot of space out of nowhere, but I'm not sure there's a bit of contact or whether Garner had to just open the steering up there to avoid a potential incident, and that in return has just led to Herrmann being contacted by Gardner. We'll take a look back very shortly, but Neil Garner drops back to P13, but Steffen Herrmann back to P17. It's a dramatic run through turns 6 and 7, and in fact now we can give you the replay from Enzo Cantor's on board. As he came down through the corner, watch Garner and Herrmann, they're fighting one another, and Cantor says, right, I'll make it 3 wide into the corner. Well, you don't really go 3 wide, and there was a bit of contact there as he came through the corner by the looks of things, and we take another look back at that from one of the exterior cameras just to give you the perspective as they rolled the way on through. Well, Herrmann goes deep. Garner there with nowhere ready to go. And it was, in fact, there was contact between Garner and Herrmann as Herrmann tried to squeeze his way back into the circuit. And then Cantor just taking a bit of side contact from the wayward machine of Herrmann. So Cantor, in fact, I would argue nothing wrong there at all. He saw an opportunity, and with Gardner and Herrmann really pushing one another as wide off the circuit as they dared, Cantor just saw the space and said, right, I'm going to make it happen. Well, a very risky move, but to be fair, he's made it count, and that's how Enzo Cantor's moved up into P5. But meanwhile, we look back to your live pictures and Neil Garner trying to now recover in this race. We're going from P13 and looking to get P11 of the Wayne and Rodriguez in the run down the back straight. I think here it's going to be a bit of an opportunistic move. He's trying to get both done. Well, he thinks he can go 3 wide, and well, all the credit to him if he pulls this off as they come onto the brakes. Well, Wayne there turns on him, but he finds Garner right at the corner apex as Rodriguez comes on through, but Wayne battling side by side with Gardner. Wayne's going to have the authority into turn 6, but Garner, of course, used to the battle of round drives here through the latter corners. As they come out of 7, towards 8 and 9, it's Wayne who's into the wall as he comes out of turn number 7. The car just clips the tyre barrier, and with that, I think Wayne now, as he tries to bring the car back onto the circuit, I think the suspension has taken a nasty knock on the rear right in particular. You can see the car wobbling there, and for the Gonskipin Racing driver, this may be an early call to the pits for repair work. But meanwhile, as he tries to get the car back together, we look from him, in fact, he does go into the pit lane, so we've called it. There is too much damage on the car for him to continue at this time. We have heard that Paul Smithhurst, after that instant, which we haven't quite seen how it happened, but for Paul Smithhurst, he has had to be towed to the pit, and well, they've had to retire the car due to damage. And well, as we look to Remco Place, who's trying to hold on to P9 versus Ryan Jackson, and they do have what is 6 tenths between themselves and Rodriguez behind. We have an opportunity to take a look at what exactly happened to the privateer of Paul Smithhurst on lap number 2. Making its way down the back straight in towards turn number 5 on the brakes. It's a lock up there and contact to the rear of what was Chris Wayne's car, and Will Smithhurst, I think, in the end just misses his braking point, locking up and in a passenger in his own car, taking the front wing off in the process, and that's how it all unfolded for the number 17 driver. Very unfortunate, but that's the way it goes sometimes, and now I think he'll be ruining what could have been a golden pair of opportunities at Okayama, but still plenty of rounds to go, and he's not out of it yet. Meanwhile, we look back to your live picture. There's multiple lockups into turn number 5. Well, goodness me, that's almost in sequential sequence as a Tufts there, battling side by side with Rody van der Meijden, and meanwhile Cantor getting the move on Gordon van den Bergen as they came on through turn number 5 into 6. It's all absolutely a battle, doesn't it, between our drivers. They make the way in towards turns 8 and 9, and I can tell you one thing, they may be pushing hard, but they are giving it everything in respectful manner as they make their way through 8 into 9 now. Miles looking up the inside of van den Bergen, can't quite find it at the moment, but he'll think about it in the run towards turn number 1, surely, as Miles does have Nathan Wade, but the leader of Geoff Randall has not been able to break away from this group. But again, does he want to break away, given the fact he will need to take them through on the pits, and the less through he can take in the pits, the better. So I think he's just trying to stay one step ahead of this group as we jump on board with the 85 of Adam Miles as it makes its way down towards turn number 1. Now heading up through the gearbox here into the 6th lap they charge. Looks for the move here versus van den Bergen. Bergen's going to give him the space, and as they exit out, we're still there. You can just see the front wing of van den Bergen's car, and that comes back into the picture as Miles drifts his way into turn number 2, or slides his way, we should say. But as they come on out, then van den Bergen can cover him off. But of course, with this battling, it means that Cantor is now a whole second up the road from Miles. I think Miles at this point will be thinking, right, I need to get this done. We are losing too much time. There's a small lock-up in the front from Wes Daniel Tufts in P3, but Miles definitely now being frustrated as Wade only 2 tenths off, and they are losing the pace of the top 4 currently, and they will want to be on that pace given the fact that Miles and Wade in particular both have race leading pace as we saw in the sprint. But as they head on down van den Bergen, they're staying on the outside, I think, realising as well, we're fighting too much, I need to let this go. Wade's going to be given the run on the inside. Nathan Wade are very, very adventurous there to go for it so late, a little tap between the wheels of them, but as they make their way into turn number 6, Wade comes on through. I think he feels as though if Miles is going on through, I'm going with him whether you like it or not. I think van den Bergen was trying to say it's only one at a time, but for Nathan Wade, I don't think he's taking no as an answer as they head in towards turn number 8 now, and going through the left into right-hander. Well, meanwhile, Randall here as he comes on through turn number 9, feeling some more pressure as we ride on board and look back from the 107 Gonskipin Racing machine, and the Briton after taking the lead, he's not broken away. Indeed, I think he's just taken the authority at the front of the field, and it's now just trying to simply take as little fuel into each and every lap as possible, or out of the car we should say, in each and every lap as possible, and that way give himself an opportunity to still be your leader come at the end of the pits. But of course, the plan may be one part, but how it plays out in actuality is a completely different concept. And as they make their way into turn 1 this time, will Cantor now ahead of Tufts as they head on through. In fact, Tufts trying to come back here, looking around the outside of Williams' corner at turn number 2, which is going to be a cutback if Tufts is going to go for this. I don't think he's going to be able to get it, however, given the fact that Cantor looking quite strong as they come through 3, heading up towards the right-hander of 4 they go. Line astern for now, but definitely this top 7 starting to really come together a bit. Gordon van den Bergen the opposite in that trend. He does seem to be falling away from the leading 6, and we may see Gordon van den Bergen fall out of the hunt very shortly. But then again, perhaps he's just backing off right now and staying in arm's reach. And then we do see in the rear of the camera, Titus de Jong, Renkel Place, Brian Jackson and Juan Rodriguez. They're all battling for what is P8. So that battle's coming to attention as well as Cantor looks up the inside of the Vendemaiden. Goes all in here, does the privateer from Italy. And well, right now, Vendemaiden not putting up a fight into turn 6. And Cantor in the 77 gaining 1 more place. He's got 1 more to go before he becomes leader of the race out on circuit. And as they make the way up towards turn 8, I think that's what Cantor wants. All he wants to do is be leading. He has an absolute itch to scratch. Meanwhile, Nathan Wade looking up the inside of Tufts. So a good number of our faster drivers now in terms of over the season, and championship leader Nathan Wade in particular started to want to pick more places up. I think they're trying to set themselves up. Meanwhile, Randall into the pits. He comes and he's the first driver to come for his scheduled stop. So Geoff Randall's decided enough's enough and let the rest of the pack fight one another. Now with that, of course, was it the right move or was it not the correct move? That will be the question that we can only tell once all the pit stops are played out. But I think Randall has gone for a gamble, and will we see the field react by coming in at the next lap? We can see it. Meanwhile, Vendemaiden side by side with Miles into turn 1. Vendemaiden's going to lose a bit here with Miles just taking the place off him, but I think the Vendemaiden recognising that now's the time for everybody to work together to make sure that Randall does not gain anything from his positioning in the pit lane. Steffen Herrmann into the pits from P15. He's decided to call it early as Randall's making his way back out. He goes past my commentary booth window, as mean we continue to look at the leaders here as they come up through the rise of 4 and down towards 5, but charging on through, of course, a bit further back. We do also have that battle for P7 between Pleiser and teammate Titus de Jong for RT Racing. And there's Jackson Rodriguez all over the back of the pair as they make their way up towards turn number 5. You can see the leaders there continuing to square off as Miles being attacked by Cantor. Cantor on the inside, Miles on the outside, and well, I think for Miles now it's all about, does he give in here? He's not going to. This is going to cost them both time, and with Randall having had his pit stop, this is time that Randall will be gained on if he nails his outlaps. But meanwhile, Miles still insists it's going to be too wide all the way down towards turn number 8. This is brilliant racing, but it's costly in terms of race time. Meanwhile, Daniel Tuss at the inside of Vendemaiden as Miles gets the nose ahead for now. Still too wide into turn 9. Oh, goodness me, Tuss almost loses it. Contact with Wade, and Van den Bergen just misses, careening into the back of Tuff's car. How on earth the 3 of them just survived that? My good lord, great reactions for all of them. Cat-like reflex, it must be said. But Enzo Cantor's into the pit lane. Cantor knows that he's losing time battling. He wants to make the jump, and will has that battling with what was Miles cost him versus Randall. That will be the thing that's going to be on his mind as they make the way up towards turn number 1. And once again, Titus de Jong still ahead of what is Ryan Jackson with Renkel Place, his teammate just in front. But as they all power the way in to the opening corner, we see here Anders Nielsen making his way in towards turn number 1, and further back, where is Geoff Randall? Here he is coming down through the final corner. We still have Cantor in his pit box. In fact, he's just left his pit box, and as Randall heads on through, Cantor is going to come out, and it's a very, very short stop for Cantor. It's 8.75 seconds stationary. Randall's 12.5, so I think Cantor's decided to underfuel and is expecting that he will be in a pack with Randall, and he's going to gamble on Randall getting ahead of him and then just simply following Randall to the finish in terms of saving some fuel so he can actually go racing for the win. So Cantor really playing a dangerous game in terms of how much fuel he's taken. But as they make their way up towards turn number 4, well, time will tell whether the dice roll was worth it. Meanwhile, the RT Racing pair of Placer versus Titus de Jong, they're still battling one another, and Placer holds the lead position in P6. P6 on track, but we do believe this is effectively P8 once all the strategy is played on out there fighting for as they come through turn number 7 up towards 8 now. We can see the lead pack yet to pit just in the foreground of the cameras. The camera spins on around. Meanwhile, Jackson there taking a little bit of a peek to the inside and thinking about it. He does seem to have a little bit of an itch which he wants to scratch in terms of making moves, but I think patience is going to win out for now, and it may reward him in the long run, albeit he is gradually being relegated away from fighting for the potential top 5 of this race and into a fight for what will be just inside the top 10 as they make the way down through turn number 11 for the ninth time of asking. We're coming on through Neil Gardner into the pit lane, so he's decided to call it early as well as he comes on through. And Gardner, of course, was up the road earlier on and now will fall down to a degree. But as we do see Jackson continue to inch closer to the back of Titus de Jong, no sign of potential overtake coming. They're all waiting at this time, and I think now we are in a little bit of the strategy phase of this race in terms of nobody really wants to make a move, or if they are, they're hoping that their opponent they make the move on notices that it's just simply a change of places to make sure that they're gaining as much pace and time in the race rather than battling one another for ultimate track position. But Jackson, he keeps thinking about it as we see it. De Jong goes a bit deep at 4. The car continues to understeer as he gets the power down, and Jackson will have an opportunity to come on through, albeit De Jong is going to hold him side by side. You can see their Plycer pulling over to the outside line to give De Jong all the speed he can as meanwhile Rodriguez tries to part the seas between the two of them. He sees the doors open in the middle, but it's not enough in terms of speed to give him the run as Willwood is now De Jong who close up behind Plycer, with Plycer locking up there into turn number 5. With the RT Racing pair working together as much as possible to hold their positions. They want a double top 10 finish here today. Understandable, it's been some time since we've last seen that from them. But meanwhile, we look to the leaders as they head up through turn 8 into 9 and coming through the left into right-hander here. Will Adam Miles, still your leader out on circuit, but we believe it is close between him and what is Cantor and Randall. And Randall is at 7 tenths off the back of the Cantor at this time of the battle for P11 and gradually closing. I think Cantor is pushing as much as he can, but no sign of pit stop from Miles, Wade, Vandermaiden, Van der Bergen or Daniel Tush yet. The top 5 all stay together, and behind them it's the same for his Remco Plycer, Titus de Jong, Ryan Jackson and Juan Rodriguez, with Anders Nielsen into the pit lane from P10, and I think that will put him out just towards what is P14 or P13. But as we see the two lead packs charging on through, meanwhile here's Randall, who is trying to close versus Enzo Cantor. Although I think Cantor right now trying to run off here, and well, this is the opposite to what we expected. I think for Cantor, he's trying to deliver as much as he can now in order to make sure he leapfrogs ahead of Miles, Wade and company when they do come into the pit. And then if he needs to save fuel, well, he'll have enough distance. There'll only be Randall that will follow him potentially come the very end of the race. But again, a very risky strategy here, given the Randall's pit time 12.5 seconds to Cantor's 8.75, and that is almost a whole 3 seconds, in fact almost a whole 4 seconds worth of fuel that has not gone in the car, and well, that could be detrimental if Cantor has not done the calculations correctly. But meanwhile Adam Miles here still holding on to lead with Wade close behind as they come on down through turn number 6. Difference in lines there, Miles taking a much more gentle approach to the apex, Wade meanwhile clattering over it. As they come through 7, well, they take similar lines there, as we're hearing that Wayne's been involved in a crash of some description. Chris Wayne, let's come on our timer off screen. If you can't see it, we can on all the data that's fed through to us here in the commentary booth, and we'll try to understand what's happened to the skipping racing driver shortly. But meanwhile, Miles holding on to this lead. Does he show any sign of peeling into the pit lane? No, he does not. He carries on through turn number 10, and the top 5 all stay out there, all decide not to give in yet to temptation, which is to end the strategic worries as soon as possible, and instead they're playing the long game here of the overcut, or what just used to be known as going long, simply put, by staying out there until the fuel dries up. But meanwhile, Roddy van der Maiden in P3, the SDN driver potentially on for one of his best performances of the season if he's able to hold on to the top 5, and as he comes on through into his turn at number 2, relishing this opportunity is the Dutchman in the full team. But heading up towards the uphill right-hand hairpin of turn number 4 very shortly, all over the back of Wade. I think Nathan Wade now trying to back the car off and save as much fuel as he can, given I think they all know the pit stop is coming sooner rather than later, but he wants to save as much as possible now, so that way he can position himself at the front of this group when they all eventually do decide to pit, and then he can potentially be the one who runs off the distance or chases after, presuming that Cantor and Randall get out ahead of them all. He can be chasing after the pair for the win of this race, because of course Wade eager to make another win as he makes way on towards turn number 5, and Van der Maiden, who's the focus of our cameraman's attention. Another lockup there on the front right brake. He's got to be careful of those lockups, because every time he does, of course, he takes life out of the brakes. He also puts excess heat into them, and that means they don't provide as much retardation force when we do get towards the end of the race, particularly if they're burning hot. The brakes in just do not grip up as much as they normally would, and it'll be the same for the tyre as well, particularly if he starts achieving a blister on the tyre. But meanwhile, as they make their way through turn 8 into 9, we look from Juan Rodriguez, and here we do see the Firebird Sim Racing driver. He's all over the back of Jackson, De Jong and Palacio at the back here. And Rodriguez, of course, on a recovery drive after the difficult start to the day in the round 13 sprint. But he's made great work in getting into the second pack and definitely in contention for a top 10 finish. So for the Spaniard, it's all about the patience now and knowing when to pounce. But meanwhile, we have had confirmation from the pit lane. Chris Wayne has had to retire the car. The gun-skipping racing machine has been worse for wear and not able to be repaired. And well, this is what happened to Chris Wayne. Making his way out of 10 into 11, coming on down. Car sliding quite aggressively. And, well, in the end, I think something's gone wrong with the car, because he's just had to park up and it's had to be towed to the pits immediately. But Chris Wayne there, I think the team making the call that we need to box the car and move on to the next round. It's not been our day today here in Japan. Well, one driver's lost is another gain, of course, and Rodriguez, of course, gaining places at the expense of Wayne. Meanwhile, we look from there back up towards the front here on your live pictures. We've moved into the second half of the race, and we are in a little bit of the calm before the storm here. But as Wade looking around the outside of Miles, is this a sign now of Wade trying to up the tempo? Because we don't normally see this until they're about to come into the pit. Indeed, so you may recall back in Australia last week, where it was a lead pack that was very quiet, and then suddenly, with only 2 laps before they all came into the pit, we saw everybody started to bustle for position, albeit the undercut was key there, and everybody pitting within the opening 15 to 19 minutes. But here, drives going as long as possible, but Wade trying to make a move on Miles. In return, Miles covering him off. Already been made it still there. As they come for 8 into 9, well, meanwhile, Vandenbergen and Tufts also staying with them, albeit a bit further back by 6/10 is Vandenbergen. So I wonder if the second racing drive has decided he wants to give himself a bit of breathing room here to try and give himself opportunities on strategy. As they come down for 18, down through turn 10 into 11, not 18 into 19. We suddenly had a lot of corners to the circuit. Otherwise, into the pit lane from the second pack come the RT racing pair of Remco Pleiser and Titus de Jong. And well, this is a smart call from the team. They've decided they need to box together and therefore can use one another. And they make their way back out the pit lane, and simply put, they'll be able to save any fuel, and they can start to potentially underfuel the cars by a lap in order to give themselves every opportunity to gain race time. They can fuel save when they exit, and then they will leapfrog their peers. But we'll have to wait and see how that works out in practice. As meanwhile, Geoff Randall now starting to gain on Enzo Cantor as we make our way into the closing at 17 minutes of racing. I think Randall now starting to feel that the fact he's taken on that extra fuel in the pits versus Cantor, it will give him an advantage. It will give him the natural ability to push on Cantor there, making a rare error through turn number 1. Randall looking to try and just take the race tonight. That's going to cost Randall time. He's had to back off then to Williams at 2. Well, Cantor now feeling the pressure, I think, and also trying, I think, to find the way to save a bit more fuel without losing race time. Meanwhile, making their way down the back straight, of course, having lost the RT racing pair recently, coming to the pits, Rodriguez and Jackson are now fighting for with P6 out on circuit. We believe this is the battle for P8. And as they come down through turn 6 into 7, Rodriguez has got ahead. I think Jackson has tried to be as compliant as he possibly can here, because now they know they're in the race of the day for them in terms of looking to try and be inside that top 10 on strategy as they come up towards turn at number 8. Meanwhile, we look to Miles as he heads towards what is the final 2 corners. Does he pull over to the pit lane? No, he stays out once again. It is a very close-knit pit lane towards that apex of turn number 10, so they could snap at the last moment, albeit they do have to slow the car quite considerably, but no movement there. They stay as they were as the top 5, make their way into another lap, but Rodriguez into the pit lane, so that move on Jackson was to give himself authority, and Jackson now will know that he's got to go for broke here in order to try and hold the Firebird Sim Racing driver back when the strategy has been completed. But as he makes his way to his pit box, meanwhile, Titus de Jong and Remco Pleiser, they have come out as they were, but Pleiser ahead of his teammate for RT Racing, and now making their way in towards turns 10 and 11. Well, we'll have to see whether Rodriguez comes out in all of this, as they both took an 11-second stationary stop. Meanwhile, Rodriguez gradually making his way on down as we look to the blimp camera. Well, there goes Cantor and what is there, Randall. And now as we see Rodriguez heading out on towards turn number 1, well, I can't see Pleiser or de Jong anywhere. And as they head up towards the corner, there they are. You can see them in the rear of the picture. And well, with that, Rodriguez has jumped them with a pit stop of 10.3 seconds. So Rodriguez in just 1 lap lap. I think Finn, as though he had more pace out there, and he's gained considerably, as now the Firebird Sim Racing driver is only at 4 seconds off of Randall and Cantor, and if he's got enough fuel to push to the end, well, given the fact we are expecting Cantor and Randall to fall back into what is a top 7 battle come the end of the pit stops, Rodriguez right now could potentially be finding himself battling for a top 5 finish come the end, as even the win, if the cards fall his way, albeit right now I think he's been dealt a hand where he needs to make sure that he's not going to have his champ card stolen by Pleister and De Jong behind as they look to power on down towards turn 5 in the pursuit of Rodriguez. A load of intricacies starting to build up here, and permutations away in terms of the driver's got enough fuel in order to get to the end of the race unscathed in terms of fuel capacity, and if not, which pack do they try and close up to or fall back into in order to fuel save and give themselves those options? Well, for Pleister and also Willis De Jong with their 11.3 second stops, the team nailing the pit stop for both drivers to the identical point of attempt. Well, they'll now be thinking about they've just got to run it hard and chase down Rodriguez, and also be mindful that Jackson is out there on his lonesome at the moment as De Jong is falling away from Pleister, and in return Neil Gardner closing up little by little. He is lapping slightly faster on average compared to Pleister and De Jong, and could Gardner also get himself back into a battle for a top 10 after how it started out, and now on the recovery drive is the 74 as he comes on through turn at number 11. Meanwhile, we look from him to Enzo Cantor. And Cantor heading in towards turn number 1. He has got Randall all over the back of him as he powers his way on through. And we ride on board the gearbox here as Cantor makes his way through turn number 2. Now powering his way up towards turn number 4. We've still got what is the best part of 13 minutes remaining, and our top 7 drivers, in fact top 6 drivers, we should correct ourselves, have yet to pit. So it does mean everything is still wide open on this strategy battle for the win of the race, and Cantor and Randall will be wary of the fact that right now they have not seen any sign of the leaders wanting to pit. They won't want to fight one another too hard. Cantor meanwhile leaving the door open in the run down the back straight. Randall being given the opportunity to come on through, and I think Cantor needs, as he needs somebody a fuel save off of to get him safely to the end, given how short his pit stop was. Indeed, he's the only driver to take a stop when the stationary time was in single digits in terms of whole numbers. Meanwhile, for everybody else, it is double digits as Roddy van der Meeden comes into the pit lane. He releases himself from the top 6, and he now makes his way up towards what is pit box very shortly. But Miles, excuse me, as my voice briefly goes there, Miles, Wade, Vondenbergen and Daniel Tufts all stay out as they make the way through turn number 1 for the 17th time, and as they come on through and up towards what will be turn number 2. Well, for the quartet here, how long can they go? As Ryan Jackson's already in as well, so it does mean that Jackson right now trying to get the overcut versus Rodriguez, Pleister and De Jong, and for what is van der Meeden, he'll be hoping he's got the jump on what is Randall and Cantor. And speaking of Roddy van der Meeden, well, he makes his way up towards turn number 1 on pit lane exit. Meanwhile, here comes the pair of Randall and also what is their Cantor, and van der Meeden comes out behind them, so Randall and Cantor have made the jump, but Roddy van der Meeden not too far off, so it's a great run for the 14 driver for STN. He finds himself right backing up into what is that lead battle when it all plays out, and will now, for Miles, Wade, Vondenbergen and Tufts, there'll be relayed information from their pit walls, which is that it is Cantor and Randall have jumped ahead of van der Meeden. They have not come out behind him, so you need to consider pitting. As our drives head on around here, and indeed the laps are ticking on down. We can also tell you that Ryan Jackson has come out between Remco Pleister and Titus de Jong, so he has split the RT racing pair, albeit Jackson in P11 as he makes his way up towards turn number 5 on the charge here, and well, it's going to be a look for a move immediately from de Jong. He's going to react. He wants to be trying to follow his teammate home for a top 10 finish. Well, it's going to be side by side down. Jackson on the right of your picture, de Jong on the left of your picture. Onto the anchors they go. And Jackson not finding this one too hard. I think wary of the fact that Pleister could potentially be caught up to by De Jong, and therefore looking for another opportunity. But meanwhile, we look from them to into the pits comes your top 4. They've gone as long as they possibly could, but finally, after what is 17 laps, they've had to bring it in due to the fuel tanks running dry. But as they all come to the stationary points now for Cantor and Randall, it all comes down to, was it the right call to pit early? Well, here is Enzo Cantor. He's found his way back ahead of Geoff Randall in the run down towards turn number 5 on this lap. And as he comes through the final corner, well, Miles and Wade are already leaving their pit boxes. And in fact, we take a look to the blimp camera here as Miles comes on out, and wait, it's been a quick stop for Miles. The same for Wade, and I can't see any sign of Cantor, nor can I see all that what is Randall. In fact, I think we can just briefly see them, and there's the gap. So we have got now a top two that is trying to break off into distance with Vandenbergen in P3, and then it is Randall and Cantor together, albeit in the opposite order. It's Cantor P, what is 4 there ahead of Randall, but as they all come on through now, we look back to the closer cameras here. The undercut has not worked here today. The overcut has been the superior strategy, and now for Cantor and Randall, they have got to go hunting, and their first target will be Vandenbergen, but with Vandenbergen being a hole, what is 1.8 seconds off of Nathan Wade, is it too late? And had the top two just given themselves every opportunity, we'd see Miles doing a little bit of side-to-side weaving on the back straight. He's allowed one, not allowed to weave more than once. And Miles right now trying to break the toe to Nathan Wade to put another win out of the grasp of Wade as they come on down and through. But Wade is still there for the time being as they make their way through the left-hander and heading in towards turn number 7. Miles will know that he's got to give it everything right now. Wade, by comparison, with a 10.4 second stationary time to Miles' 12 seconds. So I think Wade also wants to stay with Miles to give himself an opportunity to just sip a little bit of fuel over the back of the number 85. And he won't want to fall back into the clutches of the battle for P3 and turn it into a 4-way fight for P2 subsequently. But as they head up towards what is turn number 10, I think Wade is starting to fall slightly as Titus de Jong and Ryan Jackson battling for 8 and 9. It's de Jong on the inside through 9 on the apex there. Meanwhile, Jackson still holding firm, takes the grass slightly, but he does keep 2 wheels on circuit as they make their way through 10. Down the hill they go. Jackson still on the outside into 11. I think he will have to give this one up unless he can get a cutback, but de Jong says no, you're going to have to go slow if you want that, as they make their way up towards turn number 1. Now Jackson has the opportunity to try and use a bit of an overspeed here to go into one on the inside. De Jong's going to try and hold it outside to inside into turn number 2, but I think that's going to be difficult given the way the apex tapers quite late on, and in the end de Jong has to back out. Meanwhile, Neil Gardner now trying to get into the mix as they make their way through turn number 2 through the left-hander, and no opportunity for Neil Gardner, but plenty of opportunity for Ryan Jackson to hold the position as they make their way through the SF3 and up towards 4. And Will Gardner taking another look up the inside here versus de Jong, going all in on the brakes. It's going to be bold here from the 74 driver. De Jong gives it the space, it goes deep, and it will be the power now as they exit turn number 4 and up towards 5 they go. And Will Jackson there trying to give the toe initially to de Jong and then splitting the toe equally between the two drivers, puts himself in the middle. Steffen Herrmann is also coming up behind as they make their way up towards turn number 5, but he's still 1.2 seconds off Steffen Herrmann, and now he'll be thinking what can he do to get into this battle for the final spot of the top 10. Well, meanwhile, we look from them to Enzo Cantor, and well, we can see here Cantor in P3 with Vandenbergen falling backwards. And now Cantor doing everything he can to just simply stick his foot in to hold onto that P3 position, and Randall trying to come back to fight for a podium slot. Of course, Randall on pole at the start of the day, lost out and finished just outside of what was the top 5 in the sprint race, and now trying to make sure he finishes on the podium. He'll definitely be a top 5 here if things carry on as they are, albeit we keep that in mind that we do have the P6 driver Brody Vandermaiden right behind them all, so Randall could be at risk of losing out another top 5 in this one if things don't go to plan. But Enzo Cantor right now really trying to dictate the run in P3. Randall, I think, doing everything in his power to try and get past and get clear, as Cantor really has been a thorn in his side in terms of the way he's wanted to play this out in strategy. But as they head through 1 into 2, Cantor back on the outside now 2, and Randall will get the inside all set and done. It's a lovely move from Randall, and Vandenbergen tries to follow this up here, but meanwhile Cantor simply says no, only 1. And as they make their way in towards turn number 4, when the maiden looks up the inside in return on Vandenbergen, it's going to be too wide as they hit the apex. Vandermaiden goes all for it here, and Vandenbergen falls a little bit deep off corner. That's going to cost him some speed, plus the fact the toe is being given right now on that inside line, and that's exactly where Vandermaiden has positioned himself. I think Vandenbergen will gradually lose out here as that double toe that his rival is picking up is going to become ever more potent. Although I say that, it looks as though Enzo Cantor is struggling on the inside. He's had to back the car in its entirety, and well, as a result, Vandenbergen gets 2 places at the price of 1. Meanwhile, it's almost 4 wide here into turn number 5, and this is Titus de Jong battling with Neil Gardner, also Ryan Jackson. Jackson holds on to P10. But now as they make the way through turn 5 into 6, and behind it, Steffen Herrmann getting right into the thick of this as we ride on board with the privateer. Looking up the inside there of it's Titus de Jong, but it's side by side on corner exit. Can't quite find it. Can the number 12 driver as he makes his way up into turn number 8 onto the brakes again. De Jong goes deep, and there Herrmann taking as much apex as he can to rotate the car. But as he comes into turn number 9, of course, De Jong now has the run back on the inside. But this is giving Gardner and also Jackson an opportunity to start to put a little bit distance between them. But as they come down through 10 into 11, Steffen Herrmann, of course, second place in the championship going into tonight. With the way the results have gone, I think Herrmann, he could be losing that second place spot, or at least feeling it's under threat after the final checkered flag here. But as he heads down the start finish straight, meanwhile you can see up the road, and that is what is Ryan Jackson going defensive versus Gardner into turn 1, and it will push the pair back towards De Jong and Herrmann as a result. Coming out of 1 in towards 2. 2 wide, the pair make the way on in, but then settle into line astern, and nobody wanted to make the move initially, but Herrmann getting a better run off the corner at turn 2, and the same for Gardner just in front. So Gardner's going to make it 2 wide through the edge. The same for Herrmann here as he heads up towards turn number 4, and well, either way you cut it here, it is going to be adventurous, and both tries to go around the outside, both Gardner and also it's Herrmann. Herrmann goes a little bit deep there and can't quite catch the car in time, but he will get the toe. The pair fighting in front, and De Jong's not able to get the toe, and this is going to give Herrmann all the speed he needs as he makes his way on down in towards the next braking zone. He'll get his nose ahead, he'll look to try and grab even more toe here. As you can see, Gardner cutting across the front of Jackson. Neil Gardner's got the place for P10, a small lock up there for Gardner, but nothing bad coming of it. And meanwhile, Jackson back to P11, and Steffen Herrmann takes P12 at long last, he'll feel. After a brilliant battle with Titus De Jong on the previous lap that started at this very corner at turn number 7. But as they settle down for a brief moment, albeit I don't think it's all done between them. Meanwhile, we look to your race leader, Adam Miles, and well, right now he is 1.2 seconds clear of Nathan Wade, and that gap is oscillating in the region of 1.1 to 1.2. But the key point here is that Miles has got a good gap between him and Wade. And when we say a good gap where he's not threatened by the slipstream on the extended straights, the drive behind will gain, of course, in the form of Wade, but not enough to really bring that gap back into battling season as they make their way through turn 1 into 2. And as the pair carry on through, Geoff Randall, meanwhile, has now got himself a 7/10 of a second gap, in fact 9/10 now versus Enzo Cantor. So I think Randall's investment in additional fuel in the pit stop as part of the undercut is paying dividends, and he will find himself, presumably he doesn't make any mistakes. Of course, commentators curse not applying, we're not wishing any mistakes on the 107 driver. He will find himself back on the podium, come the finish as a minimum as he comes up through turn number 4. Cantor goes a little bit deep, and I think Cantor really started to struggle in the late stage of this race with side-by-side with Gordon van den Bergen on quarter exit. And Van den Bergen will have a slight toe here from Randall, albeit as they make the way down. In fact, it is Cantor who does seem to just be staying slightly ahead, but Van den Bergen has the inside line, so on the brakes he goes. Both drivers go in as late as they can. Small tap between the rear wheels between them, and it's Van den Bergen who gains P4, and Cantor's forced back to P5 as they have Daniel Tufts and Roddy van der Meyden trying to close up as soon as possible. And will Daniel Tufts here, he'll see Cantor and think, right, I'm coming back at you, because of course these two have quite the rivalry. Oh goodness me, it's a mistake there from Roddy van der Meyden on the exit at turn number 7, just misses the tyre barrier, and that could have been a race ender there with only a couple of laps remaining. Well, what we were about to say with Daniel Tufts and chasing down Enzo Cantor, of course these two were huge rivals at Bathurst all the way back in the early portions of the season. I think that rivalry has not gone out in terms of the fire that fuels it yet. But as they make the way down through the final corner onto what will be the final lap, the race leaders here charge across the timing line. I don't think they'll have another lap in it. They may in fact have another lap, thinking about it, given the lap is just over 1 minute 40, and when he crossed line, Adam Miles, he crossed with 1 minute and 45 seconds to go, so he could really dictate it. Again, the fact he has got a bit of a gap between himself and Wade, it's a 2-second gap, and with Miles is able to sneak in one more lap, could that play hazard and carnage to some drives fuel calculations? That'll be the thing that's on their mind in terms of, will we be seeing not just a 23rd lap but a 24th one as well? So that will be a concern. But meanwhile, we look back here to the battle for just outside of the top 10. It's the battle for P11. Steffen Herrmann ahead of what is Ryan Jackson and Titus De Jong, and well, Herrmann recently got ahead of Jackson into the aforementioned 11th place position, and well, with no opportunity there for Jackson to come back into turn number 4, we take a quick look back at how Herrmann got the position. Well, this was right on the run down the start, finish straight in towards turn number 1, and my gut feeling says that Herrmann's gone all in here on the brakes, and whilst Jackson's tried to cut it back, turning in a little bit too soon, in fact made to go deep, and in return there, Herrmann just carrying all the speed he needed, and Jackson having to try and cover off what was Titus De Jong instead. But as we return to your live pictures, ladies and gentlemen, well, our drivers coming on through turn 6 and 7. Not long left in this race, But of course, the big question or conundrum is, are we getting a 20 full flap here in the feature? And will that play havoc with anybody's strategy? Well, Miles makes his way through the final corner. 15 seconds on the clock. This is going to be extremely close. Will he squeeze in one more lap? I think he will by about 3 seconds as he heads the line and canters into the pits. Cantor has run out of fuel. We thought it may happen as Miles goes onto a 20 full flap, the final lap of the day. But for Enzo Cantor, it has worked out incorrectly, and this is going to cost him very dear as the white flag waves there. Barney Flag, our flag operator, of course, on the start-finish line, and now it's going to be more places to be gained for everybody. And suddenly, for Steffen Herrmann, it's a P10 on the cards rather than a P11 as Juan Rodriguez tries to hold off Wrinkle Placer for P7 as they make their way in towards turn 2. But coming on through, the battles have calmed down inside the top three, but we still do have Gordon Vandenbergen trying to hold off Daniel Tufts, as I think some drivers now are really trying to sip the fuel as best as they can in order to get the car to the finish line. I think Vandenbergen maybe one of those drivers who has not got necessarily enough fuel to get to the end without having to now really lift and coast and also do some short shifting, albeit short shifting does very little in these cars, and indeed it comes all the way down to lift and coasting typically. But as they make their way down Vandenbergen, letting the place go to Tufts, and Tufts definitely has got the fuel. I think Vandenbergen just has not by comparison. Meanwhile, we've got a two-way battle here for what is P9 between Herrmann and Gardner. Gardner losing a potential position if he can't hold on to it as they come through turn 5. Herrmann there being sent as wide as possible. That gives him the ultimate inside run into turn 6. And Gardner pushed him as much as he can, but right now no difference between them. And Gardner losing out as Herrmann takes the authority through turn number 7 and into P9. But meanwhile, they make the way up towards the final few corners. Adam Miles makes his way down towards the final turn, and as he comes out the final corner, it's been another masterclass of pace and strategy and consistency throughout the race. Adam Miles will make it another feature race win, following on from Australia last week. The 85 car crossed the line, your race winner ahead of Nathan Wade at P2, and it'll be Geoff Randall who finally finds his way back onto the podium ahead of Gordon Vandenberg at P4, Rudy Vandermeer at P5, and then it will be Juan Rodriguez who crossed the line P6 with Daniel Tufts running out of fuel at the finish line. It's a disaster. He's had to come into the pits, and then Steffen Herrmann at P7 had a Neil Garner P8, Ryan Jackson P9, Daniel Tufts in the end I think classified as P10, Titus de Jong P11 at Renkel Place at P12, Anders Nielsen at P13 to follow up what was a P14 finish in the first race of the day for the Danishman on his debut. Congratulations to him. And as he crossed the line, he'll then be smashing home Michael P14 when that early spin cost him dear. AJ Campbell P15 as he comes to the timeline. We've still got a couple more drivers to finish after AJ Campbell, but the Arton Motorsport driver definitely just not quite comfortable with the pace today here at Okayama. And it'll be Enzo Cantor who, with that under fuel and in the end not able to save enough fuel in the second stint, having to take another pit stop, cost him dear and put him all the way down to P16 as he makes his way out of the final turn. And I think he'll be kicking himself for the fact it was a simple miscalculation and it has cost him ever so dear when it could have been fighting for a top 5 if not the podium. And then we will very shortly see Paolo Anzioso, our final driver out of the circuit, 17th place with the 2 retirements of Chris Wayne and Paul Smithhurst, and well, they will be classified as non-finished given neither driver managed to finish half the race distance. But Paolo Anzioso will be our last classified finisher on the lead lap for Auto Motorsport Blue in the 71 P17 as he comes to the timeline. But goodness me, what a race. A second race of the day to be absolutely enjoyed. And as we can see, Adam Miles here giving a little bit of a push to Nathan Wade. I think they're trying to go down round on the cool-down lap, but both drivers there being ever so close to one another. And again, that really has been the story between the two of them in terms of the ferocity of their respective pace. And well, Miles did mention that he felt that if he joined the season a little bit earlier, he could have been right up there with Wade at this point in the season. But for Miles, it's about grabbing every point he can to battle for P2 and then see how much distance he can close the Wade come the finish. But Miles once again just finding a way to stay one step ahead of Wade, but Wade in return making another podium finish, and will the consistency of Wade ever critical in his championship leadership campaign. But as our drivers now make their way towards the pit, we take a look at the race results subject to any stewards' inquiries. And in round 14 of the 2023 Skip Barber Challenge Trophy, brought to you by Gone Skipping Racing, sponsored by Musical Money, Adam Miles making it another win on the cards of the privateer by 3.6 seconds over Nathan Wade. Geoff Randall at P3 there for Gone Skipping Racing, returning to the podium. It's been some time since we've seen him there, but finally finding the way on through. Ahead of Gordon Vandenbergen for Sickhead Racing, who retook P4 off of Daniel Tufts, with Tufts running out of fuel before he could get to the finish line. And STN's Roddy van der Meyden completing the top 5 in what I believe is his best performance of the season, and a well-deserved top 5 at that. Firebird Sim Races Juan Rodriguez, only 5 seconds off the top 5 come the finish. A great recovery drive from the number 9 driver from Spain, with Steffen Herrmann battling back to P7 ahead of Neil Garner and Ryan Jackson and Titus de Jong completing the top 10, with the RT Racing driver bringing on home one top 10 for the team in the feature, but they couldn't quite make it 2 out of 2, with Remco Pleister, his teammate, finishing P11 best of the rest. Anders Nielsen at P12 when all's considered and factored for in terms of drivers ran out of fuel at the end, and ahead of what is Sebastian Holmichael and AJ Campbell, with Daniel Tufts finishing at P15 with that late pit stop cost him ever dear. It was Enzo Cantor P16 ahead of Paolo Anzioso, with Chris Wayne there P18, with the first of 2 retirements in this race, and our second retiree there, Paul Smithhurst, behind the Gone Skipping Racing driver, retiring in the early stages after completing only 1 lap, and Chris Wayne retiring after what was the completion of 9 laps in return. So 19 starters, 17 finishers, all 17 finishers on the lead lap, and indeed with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have finished our racing for today. But the story is not quite over yet, of course, at Okayama, because you've seen it all from the broadcast cameras and you've seen the racing up and down the field. But what did our drivers think of it here in Japan today? We'll be back in approximately 10 to 15 minutes with our post-round interviews. Don't go anywhere, you won't want to miss them. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it is time for our post-round interviews with our selected drivers. And today, we have quite the mixture of drivers because we'll be kicking off with our number 85, our double winner for today of Adam Miles, before then coming on to Enzo Cantor, the driver who looked to be on course to make it a double podium, at least a double top 5, and then a loss of fuel towards the end in the feature race cost him dear and saw him finish towards the back. We'll then be hearing from Gordon Vandenbergen, the Sickhead Racing driver, who made a brilliant drive in the sprint race to finish P8 and doubled it up with P4 finish in the feature, before lastly coming to the number 24 of Nathan Wade, and again another pair of second place finishes. He seems fated to always finish second at this time, and we'll get his perspective on that. But without further ado, we start off of course with our double winner for today, and as he joins me now in the interview room, Adam, welcome to you and congratulations on a double win. It's rare in the Skip Barber Challenge Trophy, but you've put it all together at Okayama, and well, what better way to kick off the second half of your championship campaign?
Yeah, I can't ask much more than that. Really good racing with everyone in race 1 and race 2. Just wasn't the perfect quali, but when the race came along, I put in probably 2 perfect races. I really can't have any complaints.
Oh, indeed. And just take us through qualifying. You mentioned that it didn't quite work out in qualifying, but it did in the races. What went wrong in qualifying?
Just trying to think. I mean, there was a time where I think I backed. Did I get something happen which put me sort of further back outside of the draft, which I wasn't too worried about. I thought I could do a pretty decent lap without any draft around here. And then on my final 2 laps, there were different cars in turn 1. One was coming out the pits, and sort of tried taking the inside line and it slowed me down, and then there was another car there on the next lap, so both of my final 2 laps were not ideal, and there was probably another 10th or 2 in that, so it wasn't perfect, but I also was starting near enough to the front to not be too worried.
Oh, indeed, and we saw from the start of the sprint race you looked to make ground, albeit it seemed as though yourself and Nathan Wade were in a little bit of a mutual, if one of us gains a place, we're both going to gain a place. Just take us through that dynamic in the 20-minute race. You very quickly found yourself carving your way into the lead.
Yep, I don't remember too much about the sprint race. I remember fighting with Nathan. I don't think Nathan was too fighty with me, but then when I caught up with Enzo, there was a bit more fighting, and I think there was one incident down into turn 1. I tried going around the outside and got shown the gravel, and sort of dropped back to I think about 4th at that point, but then I think someone spun, so I didn't lose too much ground, but I sort of had to redo all my efforts again in the second half of the race.
Oh, indeed, and the instant you're referring to there was a little bit of elbows out into turn number 1, but you made it back on and then continued to fight hard and found yourself in the lead going into the last lap. And of course in the sprint it's always very tight, and around here it looks as though for the majority of the lap you may be leading, but you're always under threat of a potential overtake into the next corner.
Yeah, although I think to be fair, I was looking back at Enzo and Nathan quite a bit, and I think Enzo was trying to get round Nathan usually into the hairpin, which just compromised Nathan's speed, I think, by probably a 10th or 2 a lap. So he was in the draft, but it was always about 0.7, 0.6, 0.8, and it's a draft, but it's not the strongest draft you can have. So I never felt like I had to defend at any time during that final part of the race, and so I was just happy to bring the car back and let them fight behind me.
Oh, indeed, able to bring the car home comfortably as race winner in our first race of the day, and then going into the feature race, starting from P10 again, a relatively slow start, but then you started to make progress, albeit I think a lot of fuel saving was starting to go in.
Yeah, the progress was definitely steady at the beginning. I wasn't trying to fuel save in the sense that I wasn't clutching into corners or lifting and coasting, but I was happy that if I was on a straight and thought I'm not going to be able to get past this, into the next corner, I would do a bit of lifting. But really, I don't think I managed to extend that first stint by any more than a fraction of a lap. So, particularly when I think Geoff pitted first on lap 7, which was going to be when I was going to pit. I was going to do an early stop and then just run, hopefully in clean air, to the end. But then Geoff pitted, and then I started fighting with Enzo, who then pitted on the end of lap 8. And so I found myself, I think, in the lead on lap 9-ish, and just had good pace. Nathan was there with me, not pushing me too hard. So I think we just had good pace, and I kept checking JRT. We were doing lap times quicker than Enzo and Geoff, so I wasn't too worried about them being around after the stop. So I just ran as long as possible with the fuel that I had, and then it all kicked off kind of around the pit stop with Nathan.
Almost definitely, and of course, with you both working together for that brief moment until the last couple of laps before the pit stop, just take us through, of course, because on one hand you're checking the times to see whether you're going to eventually leapfrog over Geoff and Enzo, but in return you've then suddenly got to turn your attention to one of your closest rivals on the circuit who's very eager to take the authority into the pits.
Yeah, there's something to be said about. I mean, it may only look like half a second, but when you come into the pits, you want a clear bit of track in front of you to really attack the first apex, attack the second apex, and then attack the line. It's quite an aggressive pit entry where there's time to be gained, lost and gained. So in those couple of laps leading up to the stop, I was defending into the hairpin because it looked like Nathan wanted to pit ahead of me. And since I didn't have any fuel left, I couldn't have gone another lap to kind of get a clean entry. So yeah, I've got my OOs out a little bit on that entry lap, and then just nailed the pit lane. And Nathan will give you his story of his pit stop, I'm sure. But I had a good pit stop, got in, got out, had enough fuel, didn't have to fuel save.
Oh, indeed. And with that pit stop and then coming out as race leader, and it seems as though you just started gradually creeping away to take the win in the end by quite the margin.
Yeah, again, it was a case of the gap was about 0.8, which is, again, gives you a draft, but it's not the strongest draft in these cars. So I was able to hold it around 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, and then perhaps he just made a mistake into one corner. I saw it go to 1.0, then 1.1, and I thought, right, he's effectively got no draft now, so I just need to make my pace show, don't give him a sniff again of a sub 1 second gap. And he had to fuel save a little bit in the last stint, so dropped off, but I was just about had enough pace to stay ahead of him at about 1 second a lap, 1 second gap.
Well, indeed, and bringing the car on home in the end, a good couple seconds clear of the championship leader, and with the double win today, you've picked up what is another 85 points to put you into P3 in the championship, now only 4 points of a second place driver, Steffen Herrmann, and that momentum is rolling with you, and it's going to roll into Montreal in a week's time. How are you feeling for Canada?
Yeah, it's been quite a few seasons since the Skippies have been to Montreal. It's obviously it's a street track of sorts, but it feels more like a proper F1 circuit. It's got the long straight, of course, leading at the end of the lap. So, there's going to be people trying to jockey for position coming onto the last lap to try and get that draft down into the Wall of Champions chicane. So, yeah, it's a good track. I enjoy driving it, and I'm looking forward to it.
Well, we do look forward to seeing how you get on at the circuit Charles Villeneuve next week. But just before we let you go, Adam, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out or a thank you to live on the broadcast this evening?
Yourself, as always, for the broadcast, and to Nathan, Enzo, everyone sort of around the tops of both those races, all very clean, had no incidents with anyone. So, yeah, really, really enjoyed it.
Well, Adam, it's been an absolute pleasure having you join me in the interview room. Congratulations once again on putting your name to the list of a limited number of drivers who have picked up a double win over a pair of rounds. And we do look forward to seeing how you get on in a week's time in Canada.
Thank you.
All the best. So here and there from Adam Miles, the number 85 privateer, who absolutely delivered when it mattered most. In qualifying, a P5 there, but in his own words, missing out a couple attempts and being compromised to a degree in certain corners. But it wasn't going to stop him from putting the hammer down in race number 1 and fighting his way on through to the very front. And after taking the lead, losing out slightly in the battle with Enzo Cantor, and then coming on back to take the lead once more at the pivotal moment at the end with Wade and Cantor fighting hard for second place. And in race number 2, it was all about being smart, making that gradual progress, and then 9 went to pit, and in the end decided to go as long as possible by noticing that his lap times were faster than those of Geoff Randall and Enzo Cantor, and it all paid dividends because he came out to a clear track as race leader, and whilst Wade pushed hard, he couldn't quite push enough to unsettle Miles, and that's why Miles made it 2 wins out of 2. And I think with the pace he's bringing to each and every race, that P2 could definitely be on the cards come the end of next week if he can find a way to keep up this rhythm. But we come from our first interview of today to our second interview of Enzo Cantor, and well, it has, I think, been a bit of a mixed day for Enzo Cantor, all things considered, but it's always great to see him when he's out of the circuit, absolutely charging hard, and well, as he gets ready to join me in the interview room, we'll get to hear his perspective on what could have been potentially two top fives undoubtedly, but a mistake in the pits cost him dear in the second race. Well, as he does join me now in the interview room, Enzo, a great race one. It looked to be going so well in race number 2, but then just a little bit too low an amount of fuel cost you dear and the potential double top 5. It must be a bittersweet day today.
Hi, Paul. Yes, you are all right. I did, I think, a very nice and fast first race, but well, I let Adam and Nathan pass me as a stupid chicken because here, if you're in front, you have to do no mistakes, and if you don't do mistakes, it's almost impossible to pass now because you can drive side by side in the last corner after in the last corners after the hairpin defending the battle line. And this was what Adam did. So then passed the Nathan too, and for me it was impossible to recover position. In the second one, I was patient. I recovered from the 9th position till the front, and well, the fact is I was battling with Adam. I saw that Geoff stopped. I thought it should be the right choice to do an undercut to stay out of the battle and to not risk to lose time battling with Adam, but I was wrong because first of all we were heavier than Adam, so for us it was impossible to keep his pace. And again, as you said, I misjudged the right amount of fuel to add, so race finished for me.
Oh, indeed, an unfortunate way to end your day, but it started off on a great note in qualifying. P3 in an extremely tight field, and in the end only missing out on pole by less than the 10th. Just take us through your qualifying session.
Well, it was a very challenging because I had the Geoff in my ass, and so I was trying to push hard in order to keep him out of my draft, but it was impossible, and he was taking all times faster than me because of my draft. But in the very last lap, I was 2/10 better green, faster than my fastest lap, but I did a mistake in the last corner and I lost 2/10. So I missed the pole in the last corner of the qualifying, but I'm happy.
Well, indeed, still being on the second row was no less of an achievement. And then when we went racing in the sprint, of course, you did have the close battle with Adam Miles, but for the majority of the race, you seem to be very insistent on wanting to be the lead car. Is that where you prefer to be the number 1 car and prefer to be the defender?
I always prefer to be the number 1 car, always. Everyone know it. When I was in front, well, I really didn't want to let no one pass me. But because in particular in this track, as I said before, if you are in front, you don't do mistakes. You are you don't overdrive, and you are very clean in the lines. It's almost impossible to lost the position. So I did a mistake, and then yeah, I lost 1 and 2 positions. But if I will be able to defend, I will defend the first position for all the race. And that was what I started to do in the second one, because if you remember, just before the pit, I was defending the first position with Adam, and I did a couple of corners side by side with him. I was in front of him after defending for about 5 corners, but finally I decided to pit. It was a moment I decided just before the last corner, but it was the wrong choice.
It may have been the wrong choice there, but we've just seen, watching back some of the race replay footage, you made a very risky but smart choice to go 3 wide versus Neil Gardner and what was, I do believe, Steffen Herrmann into turn 7. You're not afraid of making moves when you need to?
Well, obviously I was afraid. Yes, it was a risky move, but I was wishing that they was thinking that I was much crazy than them. So I was wishing they would break uh, less than me. Fortunately, no disaster, and but everyone drives very clean all the race. So yes, some little contacts in three wides, but I have to say a very smart, hard but clean racing from all the drivers in the field.
Oh, most definitely, and yourself included in that. And like you say, being willing to take those risks, and in the end, taking a little bit too low amount of fuel in the pits. And well, it must be the worst feeling in the world when you're right at the end of the race and you know you've got to pit again.
Yes, I was very frustrated in the end of the race, because I know that the fuel wasn't enough. I knew that I was faster than the driver near me, but I tried to save fuel, but it was too late, and so I lost position in the track, and finally I lost all the other position. So very frustrating for me. I was wishing in a double podium race, but I wish it will happen in the next race.
Oh, indeed. And speaking of the next race, we head to Canada next week for the circuit Jules Villeneuve. How are you feeling for the street circuit?
Well, the last time I raced there was a long time ago. I don't like so much that track. It's a dive-bound track, no? But as I said, here the field is very clean, very fair. So I think it will be a very interesting race because you have to be very fast in the first part of the lap. It's crucial to do the first corners and the next S's very fast and clean. You have to risk because you have to be very near the wall, very over the curbs, but without doing mistakes. So I think it will be an interesting and an exciting race.
Oh, indeed, and we do hope you're right up there to bring the excitement to us. But just before we let you go, Enzo, is there anybody you'd like to say thank you or give a shout out to live on the broadcast this evening?
Yes, sure. I have to say thanks to my team, as always, SRC Mimasaka in Racing. So I'm not a privateer, and I have to say thanks to all my supporters, my fans, my teammates, and my friends. And as always, you for your awesome work doing the broadcast.
Well, Enzo, it's been a pleasure to have you join me in the interview room. Congratulations once again on the third place in the sprint, and well, we do look forward to seeing whether you can make it a double podium at Canada in a week's time. But until then, have a great evening.
Thank you. It was a pleasure for me as always. Have a nice evening, you too.
So hearing there from Enzo Cantor, the driver in the number 77, who absolutely had a thrilling pair of races. There's no question about that. Having started third place on the grid, with a qualifying session which in his own words, perhaps it could have gone a little bit better. Perhaps there was a 10th or two. Perhaps there was a pole position out there as well for him. But it did not quite work out. And instead focused on what he could do in the races and battling hard from the outset in the sprint, taking the lead and also always wanting to be the lead driver. And as he says, like many who know him, if he's not up front, he's constantly buzzing to be in the lead, and well, wasn't quite able to hold on in the end, with Miles finding his way on through, and then Cantor and Wade battling for second place, but going to Wade. But still for Enzo, he didn't give up, and in race number 2 it was looking good for a double podium, but a slight underfuel cost him dear in that early pit stop when he tried to undercut with Geoff Randall, and it meant that come the very end of the race there wasn't enough fuel to get to at the checkered flag, and a second pit stop caused him to fall back to P16. And you can hear it in his voice, the enthusiasm, also the dejection when it didn't go right in the feature, and he'll be looking to make sure there's redemption on the line in Canada in a week's time. As we do come from Enzo Cantor to our next interviewee, well, you've heard from the 85 and the 77, but now we're going to be hearing from the number 50 from Sickhead Racing, Gordon Vondenbergen. And, well, what a day it has been for the Sickhead Racing driver, in the fact bringing on home one of his best performances of the season in the feature race in particular. And, well, all that and more we get to talk about with him as he gets ready to join me in the interview room. I think it's been a race, or a pair of races, that are really revolved around strategy. But as he does now join me in the interview room, Gordon, congratulations on a P4 in the feature race, which I do believe is your best result of the season thus far. You must be absolutely thrilled with how the racing has gone today in Japan.
Yeah, second race wasn't too bad. But I was running out of fuel, so on the line I had nothing more than hot air in the tank. So yeah, I just was a little bit confused. I had to let Daniel pass in the last lap and was confused that he turned into the pits and gave me the number back. So yeah, it's not too bad. I just was mostly focused on getting the right amount of fuel. So I went into the pits with Adam and Nathan, and we're looking how long they stay. And when they started, I did the same. And yeah, maybe that was the reason that I just had nothing more in the tank after the race. But it wasn't too bad. I just thought I'm not fast enough to go with these fast guys, but in the slipstream it was okay for me. Something about 0.8 or 0.5, and yeah, just focused on, didn't get too much trouble with other drivers, and yeah, be on the line.
Oh, indeed, and finding that right balance was something you seem to achieve all the way through the day. But started off in qualifying at P11 on the grid, not quite able to creep into the top 10. Is this a circuit you've normally gone well at, or is it one that you're still trying to find a bit more pace at?
I didn't really like it. I don't know why, but I just always struggling on this track with my lap times. But after a while, it is going better. I just hadn't a lot of practice this week, so I just have no practice this week because I didn't have time to practice a lot. So I started this evening the first laps, and therefore it was quite nice. And I just had no idea how to set up the car. And after the race, I asked Adam for his setup and saw that he was driving totally different than me. And after the first race, I just thought that everyone is faster than me. Daniel was overtaking me that easy that I thought my setup couldn't be right. So I just went up and not down on the wrong side, but it worked. So I'm just pretty happy with the second race.
Oh,
Also with the first.
Oh, indeed. And coming on to the first race, some close battling into the top 10 and finding yourself moving into P8, but it wasn't easy. Indeed, having to battle in particular with the likes of what was Daniel Tufts and also the RT racing pair of what was Titus de Jong and Remco Placier.
Yeah, that was quite nice. They gave me a bit of room, but it was very close and very fair, and just wanted to fight too much. So yeah, that was okay.
And in terms of battling in the sprint race, of course, we've seen at this circuit the ability to go too wide through the majority of the corners, but you've got to give it space. Just take us through particularly that latter half of the lap. It's so tight around the low speed apexes, but there's enough room that you could just keep going too wide forever, it would seem.
I think it's depending on how good the drivers are. If you have high-class drivers, they are able to stay on the line at every speed they choose. So you can drive very close to each other without kicking you out. But that needs a lot of practice and a lot of patience. So yeah, most times it worked, but sometimes it not. So it depends on you how you like to struggle with the others, and mostly it's not that intelligent to drive always not on the best line. So you will lose time to the front or lose time to the guys behind you, and they pick you up, or then you have more fight than with only one guy. So sometimes it's better to not to go too wide or three wide, so stay behind and take your time. And mostly there's maybe at minimum one chance to overtake without stressful driving 3 or 2 wide.
Indeed, finding that balancing act in terms of how many wide and battling from corner to corner is something which you carried from the sprint into the feature. And as we look at the pictures in the background, it did get quite tight on the opening stint before you guys started to come into the pits.
Yeah, I just, as I said, I was on the slipstream and I just want to stay there, and that was my focus. And I just let 1 or 2 guys go because they are faster anyway. And when they went into the box, I just stayed out behind Adam. He was today the fastest guy, I think so. And in the slipstream, you will make a lot of time good. So that was the best way for me. And when he goes into the box, I go with him.
Definitely a smart approach in terms of dictating your strategy. And as you mentioned earlier, the degree of confusion around what happened at the end for finishing P4 between yourself and Daniel Tufts, with Tufts running out of fuel just through the final couple of corners. But when you cross the line, just take us through that feeling, that roller coaster ride of emotions. So you suddenly finished P4.
Yeah, it was so close, and I just pulled down the gas, the right pedal, and hopefully the car runs and runs and runs until the line. But yeah, it does. So after that, it quit.
Oh, goodness me.
It's always a thrill if you are close together. But if you can't push because you didn't running out of gas, it's not that easy. So you have to accept it. But today it worked.
Indeed, it worked out for you, and in that you've now moved up to P5 in the Drivers' Championship on 193 points, 1 point clear at Daniel Tufts. But there's a growing rivalry between the two of you, and we expect it to grow going into Montreal next week. How are you feeling for the Canadian circuit?
I think I don't know him. I don't know. I just can't say nothing about the track.
Oh, that's absolutely fair. A bit of an unknown for yourself, and we look forward to seeing how you approach the unknown in a week's time. But just before we do let you go, Gordon, is there anybody you'd like to give a mention or a shout out to on the broadcast this evening?
Yeah, for sure. At first, you, Paul, thank you very much for your work. It's quite impressive. And for all the guys and girls who like to watch us, and for all the racers, for doing a great, giving us a great experience. Racing that close is always fun. So yeah, thank everybody who's involved.
Well, Gordon, in the same vein, we must thank you for joining me in the interview room this evening. Congratulations to you once again on your performances, and we look forward to seeing how you get on at Montreal next week.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Have a great evening.
Thanks. Bye.
So hearing there from Gordon Vandenbergen, the sickhead racing driver in the number 50, and well, what an evening it has been for him. A roller coaster ride from start to finish. A qualifying session where he was learning the circuit as he went, given the fact he didn't have too much time to practice, and putting him just outside the top 10. He quickly got to work for battling for a P8 and having to fight hard in amongst some rather tough company, but find his way home inside the top 10 and onto a P3 start for the feature race, and very smart driving all the way through, as we've seen seeing the pictures in the background all the way through his interview, staying with the fastest guys and tying his strategy to that of Adam Miles, and that's what enabled him to come out battling for a P4 finish. And whilst he'd lost it in the last couple of corners, it then came back to him with Daniel Tufts ran out of fuel and having to jump to the pit, and in return, just spluttering across the line, Gordon van den Bergen made it on throw to make it one of his best performances of the season. He's a deserved now top 5 championship contender as he makes his way into the next round of the season, knowing that the pressure is on between him and Daniel Tufts for that P5 spot. As we come from our third interviewee to our last interview of today, well, I think he will perhaps get a little bit annoyed for the fact he is becoming Mr. Second Place time and time again, despite the fact he is our championship leader. But we get ready to welcome Nathan Wade into the interview room, and well, it'll be interesting to see his perspective on what was a sprint race where he couldn't quite fight for the win, given his battle with Enzo Cantor, and in what was the feature race, just did not quite have enough in the tank to take the fight to Adam Miles. But as he now joins me in the interview room, Nathan, I hate to say this, but you are building and garnering that reputation of being at Mr. Second Place with 2 second place finishes again today. Still means you're well up in front in terms of our championship, but at the same time, I think it was a pair of wins that just went slightly amiss.
Hi, Paul. I'm actually really happy with P2 today. I felt that I was struggling quite a bit on the track today. I don't know what it was. I just couldn't seem to put in good laps, and I kept making quite a few silly mistakes. But shout out to Adam because his pace was very, very strong today. So I think P2 was probably the best I could have done. Granted, my couple of errors on the second race, and then the first race I was just defending too much, but it could have happened. But I'll definitely take the double P2 again.
Oh, indeed. And it all started with a qualifying session where it seemed as though it was always going to be a bit of an uphill battle for yourself. P4 on the grid, 4 attempts off of the pole lap set by Geoff Randall. You were in the early stages really putting the pace in, but it seemed as though as the session went on, you couldn't just quite find that final step to jump back up there.
Yeah, it's quite difficult to overtake at this track if you're in a sort of train. And I mean, as you probably saw, I think when I did start, or both me and Adam started to try and make our way up, it's carnage with 3 or 4 or 5 cars all in that one section, in the same corner at, I don't know, turn 6, 7, 8, one of them 2, one of them 3 even. But it's just such a slow sequence of corners that 2 wide just completely backs the pack right up, and it can cause some pretty intense racing. But once me and Adam got through, it was pretty plain sailing. Same with Enzo as well, actually, because he was there. It's just annoying that I couldn't ever launch an attack on Adam because I was always defending from Enzo. I think that sealed Adam's win, and definitely in the first race.
Oh, most definitely. And it was thrilling to see yourself and Enzo Cantor battling all the way on the final lap, but you've never been quite let off the leash, if you will, to go hunting after Adam Miles. But still, it led to some fantastic battling, and more of the same continued into our second race of the day as we see some pictures of you two going side by side into the turn 5 hairpin.
Yeah, I was quite lucky. I think lap 1 on the feature race, turn 3. Someone almost rear-ended me quite hard, and then also on turn 2 as well. There was a backup as well, and from then on, I had a slight bit of damage, and then I think it was lap 6, 7, or 8 maybe. But obviously, when me and Adam started to try and make our way through the pack, because it's quite a sketchy thing to do when you're starting back in like P10. At this track, it's quite a sketchy thing to do. But there was an incident with, I think it was Rody and Daniel Tufts, and which knocked Daniel off onto the grass, and he very almost took me out with his spin. He was lucky to hold it. He did well to hold the spin there, but it did break my wheel alignment. So I spent until obviously I got the pit stop in. I was probably at about 10-15 degrees turn to the left down the straights, which I think didn't help me in the second stint of the race because I got too used to driving on a wonk. But yeah, is what it is.
Oh, goodness me. And we did a moment ago see some pictures regarding that incident. And at the time, I couldn't believe that all three of you made it on through, albeit with some damage to the car. And the fact that you had to deal with a misaligned steering all the way through that opening stint, again, testament to the speed you're bringing from round to round. And towards the end of the race, of course, with Adam Miles holding the lead and yourself coming out just behind, it looked as though everything you threw at it just wasn't enough to try and keep that gap nice and tight.
Yeah, I think we'd have had a good battle had I not have ruined the pit entry. It's my own fault because I hadn't practiced it. But as you do the first two right-handers, then there is like a pit line, and you just because I hadn't practiced it yet, I assumed that was the pit entry line. So I slowed right down, and because I just saw Adam keep going, and that was when I realised, wrong line. So I lost, I don't know, a second and a half there to Adam. But luckily I had more fuel than him anyway that I'd saved. So went into the pits with him. As soon as I saw or heard his engine start revving, that's when I cut the fuel and I just went with it. All the calculation that I did with the fuel had just gone out the window because I wanted to stay with Adam. Annoyingly, it was 0.8 to like 1 second for the first, I don't know, 3-4 laps in that second stint, but I made one small error, which lost me the draft. And then I was pretty much on fuel save mode because I think I crossed the line with 0.1 or 0.2 litres left. So yeah, after I'd lost the draft, I knew I had to just fuel save for the rest of the race. But I had a big enough gap behind to Geoff, so it wasn't too scary to do.
Oh, goodness me. We're definitely taking a number of risks in the feature race, but to be fair, as they say, he who dares wins. And right now, you're on winning form with regards to the championship. Your advantage extended to almost 200 points now. And we head to Canada in a week's time. How are you feeling for the Montreal Street Circuit?
It's going to be. I feel like it's going to come down to that last straight. A bit like some of the other races this season, especially in the feature. It's going to be 40 minutes of jockeying position, all for that last chicane. But I am definitely excited for it. It's going to be a good race.
Oh, indeed. Loving the enthusiasm from yourself, and we look forward to seeing how you get on at the infamous Wall of Champions in a week's time. But just before we do let you go, Nathan, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out or a thank you to live on the broadcast this evening?
Yourself, as always, for putting on a great broadcast. It's good fun to watch back every week. Geoff and everyone else who sort out the league, you all do a great job. And then Adam, Enzo, anyone else in that front pack, it was good, clean racing today, and it was enjoyable, even if I did struggle a little bit. So on to next week.
Well, with that, we do look forward to seeing you next week, Nathan. But until then, have a great evening and congratulations once again on your double second place finish today.
Cheers, Paul.
All the best. So here and there from Nathan Wade, our championship leader, as he exits the Japanese circuit of Okayama, and well, with his head held high in his own words there, in the fact that he wasn't expecting to necessarily be at the top end of the pace, and feeling as though there were quite a few mistakes, and the man to beat was Adam Miles, and he couldn't quite beat Adam Miles, but he was able to make sure he was in the runner-up spot in both occasions, and that's what you need to do when you're up against somebody who is vying to take the wins off you. If you can't beat them, make sure you're there right behind them, and well, a couple near misses in the feature race. Of course, the infamous incident at turn number 9 coming to mind immediately, and with the damage picked up from the contact, Wade there giving us the explicit coverage with regards to the fact that 10 to 15 degrees of wheel alignment knocked out of the car, and still driving it on in absolute anger in terms of wanting to make sure to bring the car home. But indeed, a cool head in the hands of the Briton, and it goes to show in the fact that nothing seems to faze him, and what I can imagine the chicanes and the straights of Montreal will definitely definitely be in his sights, and he'll be looking to try and take a win there in order to end the streak of second place finishes. But we'll have to wait to see whether that's how it plays out in practice. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our interviews for this evening. You just heard from the number 24 driver of Nathan Wade, the privateer, and you've previously heard from Adam Miles, the number 85 privateer, your double winner for today. And also we heard from Enzo Cantor, not a privateer. We'll make sure to get that corrected for the broadcast next week, but in the number 77 car. And we also heard from Gordon Vandenbergen from Sickhead Racing, the number 50 driver. I think absolutely amazed at how things went today. But to be fair, you've got to love his enthusiasm in the fact picking up a season best performance in the feature race P4, and what I can imagine quite a few smiles when he decides to put the car to bed this evening. But with that, that concludes our interviews, and thank you to all of our drivers, and congratulations to them once again on their brilliant performances. But as we now come to a close, it is time for us to wrap up, and firstly we'd like to say thank you very much for watching. And if you have enjoyed today's show and you want to know more about the Skip Barber Challenge Trophy, as hosted of course by Gone Skipping Racing, well, you can of course head to the official Skip Barber Challenge Trophy Discord, invite link available on screen if you want to be on the grid in the future series. Alternatively, you just want to know the drivers a little bit closer and want to get to know the organisers and everything in between. Also, we'd like to take a moment to give a big thank you to our sponsors for this season, the title sponsor, of course, of Musical Money, their web address musical-money.co.uk, and Musical Money is the quick, easy and safe way to turn your musical equipment into money. But now, ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you one thing, they'll be going to Montreal, our drivers, and looking to score big, and of course the big cash prize will be a huge haul of points at the circuit Charles Villeneuve in rounds 15 and 16 on Friday the 5th of May 2023. We'll be bringing it to you live on air, and indeed a circuit that has claimed many a driver on their way to a championship campaign victory with regards to that absolutely detrimental wall of champions. But it's not just about the final chicane, it's also about the heavy braking zones and all the sweeping corner sequences and a very slow hairpin towards the end, and who's going to come out on top. And technically, where's our first street circuit of the season? Will Nathan Wade be able to find his first victory in a long time? Will we see Adam Miles continue his dominant run from Okayama, or will we see a new name jump to the top and take the spotlight? All that and more will be found out then. But until then, we have been with Gone Skipping Racing in the 2023 Skip Barber Challenge Trophy. I've been your host and commentator, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And until next time, have a great weekend ahead. Remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.